Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time to taste something truly divine. And I don't mean that metaphorically. We are going to explore the origins of chocolate, but not the sweet, creamy bars you hide in your desk drawer. No, we're after the real deal, the original, bitter, spicy, and powerful drink of the Aztec gods and warriors. Frankly, if you were dropped here for real, you probably wouldn't last the day. But that's what I'm here for, to be your impossibly knowledgeable and surprisingly calm guide on this sensory journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel, connecting us all in this quiet, late night space. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hull, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the air. It's thin, cool, and carries a scent you can't place, a mix of damp earth, wood smoke, and something faintly floral, like wilting marigolds. You're sitting low in a long, narrow canoe, carved from a single log. The gentle rocking is hypnotic, and the rhythmic splash of a paddle behind you is the only sound in your immediate world. The man paddling says nothing. His silence is not unfriendly, just focus. You're on a lake, Lake Texcoco, but it feels more like a vast, shimmering mirror reflecting a potentially blue sky. And then, you see it. At first, it's just a haze on the horizon, a smudge against the distant, volcanic peaks that ring the valley. But as your canoe glides silently through the water, the smudge solidifies. It rises from the lake itself, an impossible city of white and red, gleaming under the high-altitude sun. This is Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. You've heard stories, of course, but they did it no justice. This isn't just a city. It's a meticulously engineered marvel. Instead of streets, you see a network of canals, crisscrossed by stone and wooden bridges. Buildings seem to float on the water, their whitewashed walls so bright they hurt your eyes. People are everywhere. Some, like you, are in canoes, laden with goods, pottery, textiles, baskets of bright green vegetables. Others walk along the wide, raised causeways that connect this island metropolis to the mainland. These causeways are feats of engineering, straight as an arrow and wide enough for 10 people to walk abreast, punctuated by bridges that can be raised to defend the city. It's one of the first things you grasp. This city is both a bustling hub of commerce and an impregnable fortress. As you draw closer, the sheer scale becomes overwhelming. Towering above everything are the pyramids. At the city's heart, you see the great temple, the Temple Omer, a massive twin pyramid structure dedicated to the god of war and the god of rain. Its staircases climb steeply towards the sky, stained with color. From here, you can't quite tell what color. You look away, focusing instead on the city's pulse. It's a low hum of human activity, a blend of voices speaking Nahuatl, the local tongue, the distant thrum of a drum, and the calls of unfamiliar birds. You pass by the china pans, the famous floating gardens. They are not so much floating as they are man-made islands, rectangular plots of rich mud and vegetation anchored to the lakebed with willow trees. On them, you see farmers tending to rows of maize, beans, squash, and vibrant flowers. This is how a city this massive, built on a lake, feeds itself. This ingenious agricultural system is so productive it can yield multiple harvests a year, a key pillar supporting the empire's vast population. Historians still marvel at the efficiency of this system, and the city is surprisingly clean. You might have expected a metropolis of this size to have a certain aroma, but you notice a distinct lack of waste in the canals. It turns out the Aztecs had a sophisticated waste management system. You see men in other canoes dredging the canals, And you later learn that human waste was collected and used as fertilizer for the very china pans you just passed. There were even public latrines built over the canals. It's a small, almost mundane detail, but it speaks to a level of civic organization that rivals any city in the world at this time. You crane your neck, trying to take it all in, trying to estimate the number of souls living in this aquatic labyrinth. How many people call this place home? This is a question that historians and archaeologists are still debating. Based on Spanish accounts and archaeological surveys, some estimates place the population around 200, making it larger than any contemporary European city except perhaps Constantinople or Paris. Other scholars argue the figure could be much higher, perhaps closer to 300, when including the surrounding lakeside communities. The truth is, the exact number is lost to time, a detail we can only estimate. Your canoe finally slides into a smaller, quieter canal and bumps gently against a stone landing. The paddler gestures for you to get out. You step onto the solid ground of Tenochtitlan, your legs a little wobbly. You are here, a stranger in the heart of one of the world's most powerful empires. You don't know it yet, but you're about to discover the source of its wealth and the flavor of its power. And it's not gold or turquoise. It's something far more precious, something that grows on a tree. The ground beneath your feet is solid stone, but you still feel the ghost of the canoes rocking. The canal you arrived in is a quiet artery, but just a short walk away, you can hear the throbbing heart of the city. Your guide, the silent paddler, gestures for you to follow, and you fall into step behind him, feeling conspicuously out of place. The people you pass are striking. Men wear simple loincloths and cloaks, or two medalai, tied over one shoulder. The quality of the fabric and the intricacy of its patterns seem to denote status. You see some men in cotton cloaks so fine they shimmer, while others wear rougher fibers from the Maggie plant. You notice the warriors immediately. They walk with a purpose and a presence that sets them apart. They are members of the elite eagle or jaguar warrior societies, their status visible in their clothing and the regal way they carry themselves. Some have feathers woven into their hair or wear elaborate nose ornaments made of jade and bone. Their gazes are direct, and you find yourself instinctively looking down, trying to appear as unassuming as possible. Priests are another distinct group, their long hair matted and their earlobes shredded from ritual bloodletting. They walk with a solemn intensity that is both fascinating and unsettling. Your guide leads you onto one of the main avenues. It's wide, paved, and incredibly clean. You see teams of sweepers, keeping the public spaces immaculate. The sheer orderliness of it all continues to astound you. But it's a conversation you overhear, or rather, a single, repeated word that finally snags your attention. You don't understand Nahuatl, but you start picking out the sound, cacao. It's spoken with a certain reverence, sometimes in a hushed tone, other times with the crispness of a business transaction. You see a merchant squatting before a finely dressed nobleman. The nobleman is inspecting a piece of intricate featherwork, a mosaic of iridescent hummingbird feathers that seems to shift color in the sunlight. After a moment of consideration, he nods. But no coins exchange hands. There are no coins. Instead, the nobleman's attendant produces a small, woven bag and carefully counts out a number of almond-shaped objects into the merchant's hand. The merchant inspects each one closely before nodding, his expression one of deep satisfaction. The objects are beans. Just beans. You move closer, feigning interest in some nearby pottery, trying to get a better look. They are dark brown, ringed, and surprisingly uniform in size. Cacao. The word clicks. These must be the source of the whispers. A bit later, you see another small transaction. A woman buys a single, plump tomato from a vendor and pays with just 2 of these beans. Moments later, a man buys a rabbit for his dinner, and it costs him 10 beans. It's starting to sink in. These beans are their money. This entire, massive economy, from grand luxury goods to a simple meal, runs on these little brown seeds. This is, of course, the cacao bean, and its use as currency is one of the most fascinating aspects of Mesoamerican economics. It was the free for all. Either. The system was surprisingly standardized. The beans were often grouped for counting in units of 8, zaro, known as a shequip ilia full bag. This was the currency for large-scale tribute payments to the emperor. For everyday life, though, individual beans were the pocket change. Naturally, where there is currency, there is crime. You get a glimpse of this when you see a market guard accost a manon break open one of his beans. A puff of dirt and clay dust comes out. The bean was a fake. Counterfeiting cacao was a serious offense. Unscrupulous merchants would sometimes take old, shriveled beans, or even the empty shells of good ones, and carefully fill them with packed earth to give them the right weight and feel. It's a wonderfully human detail, the universal impulse to cheat the system, even a system based on divinely sanctioned beings. As you wonder, you start to understand that these beans are more than just money. They are a symbol of power, of wealth, of divine favor. You learn that the beans don't grow here in the high-altitude valley. They are a tropical product, cultivated in the hot, humid lowlands along the coast, in lands conquered by the Aztec Empire. They are brought here to Tenochtitlan as tribute, a physical manifestation of the empire's reaching dominance. To possess them is to possess a piece of that power. You begin to wonder about the name. The word you keep hearing, xocōlātl, is the Nahuatl term for the bean itself, but the drink made from it has another name, brew. This is where things get interesting for linguists. The word is generally accepted to come from xocōlātl, meaning bitter, and atl, meaning water. Bitter water. A fittingly straightforward name. Yet the precise origin and evolution of the word chocolate from this root is a topic of great academic debate. Some scholars argue that the Spanish found the X sound difficult and adapted it, while others propose the Spanish may have combined the Mayan word choclo, hut, with the Nahuatl atl, water, to create the word we know today. The exact path from xocōlātl to chocolate is a linguistic puzzle, a slight fog in the history of our favorite treat. For now, though, you are not concerned with future words. You are captivated by the present reality. You, a traveler from a world of metal coins and paper bills, are standing in the middle of a city that runs on seeds from a fruit. These beans are not just a commodity. They are sacred. They are a gift from a god, a fuel for warriors, and the lifeblood of an empire. You've only heard the whispers and seen the transactions. You haven't yet tasted the bitter water they create. But you know, with a certainty that settles deep in your bones, that you have to. Your journey has a new focus. You need to understand the story of the sacred bean, from the tree to the cup. Your guide doesn't stop in the ceremonial heart of Tenochtitlan. Instead, he leads you north, across one of the wide causeways, towards a place that hums with a different kind of energy. You are heading to Tlatelolco, Tenochtitlan's sister city, which had been conquered and absorbed into the capital decades ago. While Tenochtitlan was the political and religious center, Tlatelolco was its commercial soul. It was home to the single largest marketplace in the entire Aztec Empire, perhaps in all of the Americas. You hear it before you see it. The low, ambient hum of the city gives way to a dull roar, the sound of tens of thousands of people talking, bartering, and laughing at once. It's the sound of pure, unadulterated commerce. The entrance isn't grand, just an opening and a long, low wall, but stepping through it is like stepping into another world. The sheer scale of it stuns you into silence. Your jaw hangs slightly open. Before you, a vast, open plaza teems with people, a swirling kaleidoscope of color and motion. The Spanish conquistador Bernal Diaz del Castillo, upon seeing this very market, would later write that he had never seen a market so large, so well ordered, and so full of people. And you can see why. You've been to markets before, but they were chaotic, messy affairs. This is different. You quickly realize there's a logic to the seeming chaos. The market is meticulously organized, a level of administration that would make a modern city planner weep with envy. You see a whole lane dedicated to nothing but pottery, with vendors displaying everything from massive storage jars to delicate, painted cups. Further down, there's a section for textiles. Piles of cotton cloaks in every quality imaginable are neatly folded, their geometric patterns a testament to the weaver's skill. You see vendors selling animal hides, jaguar, deer, rabbit, and others selling live animals. Turkeys gobble in wooden cages, and you spot some small, hairless dogs that you learn, to your slight discomfort, are a popular food source. They are the xocōlātl, a breed raised specifically for the table. It's one of those cultural details you file away under fascinating, but let's not dwell on it. A wave of competing smells hits you. There's the earthy scent of fresh produced spiles of tomatoes, avocados, and a dozen varieties of chili peppers, from mild to fiery. The sweet, toasty smell of corn being roasted on a clay griddle, or kumel, is everywhere. Then there's the pungent aroma of medicinal herbs, a salty tang of dried fish from the coast, and the sweet perfume of the flower sellers' stalls, where elaborate garlands and bouquets are on display. And of course, there is cacao. You see it everywhere, a constant thread running through the entire tapestry of the market. It's the baseline of all value. You watch a man carefully select a large, sturdy axe with a copper hand. The price: 100 cacao beans. A woman sells a large woven basket for 30 beans. A healer offers a consultation and a small pouch of dried herbs for a handful of beans. The beans are the oil that lubricates this entire, massive economic engine. But it's not the only currency. For larger purchases, you see another standard of value being used: cotton cloaks, or xocōlātl. These cloaks of a specific size and quality were also a standardized form of currency, used for buying more expensive items like land, or paying off legal fines. A canoe, for instance, might cost a certain number of cloaks. This dual currency system adds another layer of complexity to the Aztec economy. In the center of the market, you see a raised platform where a panel of about a dozen men sit in quiet judgment. These are the market judges. They preside over all comers, ensuring fair trade and resolving disputes on the spot. If a buyer feels they've been cheated on the quality of their beans or the weight of their maize, they can bring the case directly to the judges. Justice is swift and public. There are no lengthy appeals, no bureaucratic delays. It's an incredibly efficient system for maintaining order among the estimated 60 Zorro people who came here to trade every day. But as you watch this incredible flow of goods and beans, a question starts to form in your mind. How are these prices decided? Is this a free market, driven by the invisible hand of supply and demand? Or is it a command economy, where prices are set by the emperor or some central authority? The truth, as historians still debate today, is likely somewhere in between. Scholars have long argued about the nature of the Aztec economy. Some, analyzing tribute lists and state-controlled warehouses, argue that it was primarily a system of redistribution, where the emperor collected goods from conquered territories and doled them out as he saw fit. The market, in this view, was secondary. Others argue that the Tlatelolco market shows clear evidence of a vibrant, commercialized economy where prices fluctuated based on availability and demand, a system largely independent of the state. It's a classic chicken and egg problem. Did the tribute system feed the market, or did the market's demands shape the tribute? The answer is probably yes to both, a complex interplay that we are still trying to fully understand. You wander through the crowd, a ghost from the future, marveling at it all. This entire system, This bustling metropolis of trade functions without a single piece of metal currency. It runs on faith in the value of a small, better being. You feel a growing desire to not just be an observer, but a participant. You want to hold these beings in your own hand, to feel their weight, to possess your own small piece of this world's wealth. To do that, however, you need something to trade. And you have nothing. Your pockets are empty. Or are they? The desire to participate is a powerful one. You can't just be a spectator in a world this vibrant. You want to feel the smooth, rich surface of a cacao bean in your palm, to hold the currency of the realm. But you have nothing of value. The clothes on your back are strange and foreign. Your language is useless, and you have no skills that would be immediately recognizable or valuable here. You feel a pang of true vulnerability. In this world, you are destitute. You wander away from the busiest sections of the market, towards the periphery where the goods are less glamorous. There, vendors sell simple, everyday things: firewood, limestone powder for processing maize, rough-spent wine. It's here that you have an idea. It's a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it's all you have. You approach a man selling water from a large clay jar, ladling it out for thirsty shoppers in 2 small gourds. He looks tired, his face beaded with sweat under the relentless sun. You catch his eye and, using a series of gestures, you offer to take over his task for a while. You point to him, then make a gesture of sitting undresting. Then you point to yourself and mime the action of ladling water. He looks at you, confused at first, then suspicious. Why would a stranger offer to do his work? But then he looks at your strange clothes, your lost expression, and perhaps sees not a threat, but someone truly desperate. He hesitates, then gives a short, sharp nod. For the next hour, you serve water. Your back aches and your arms tire quickly from the repetitive motion of dipping the gourd and pouring. But you do it diligently, even offering a small, awkward smile to your customers. You are a curiosity, and people stare, but no one bothers you. The man who owns the stall watches you from the shade, his expression unreadable. When the sun begins to dip lower, he comes back, taps you on the shoulder, and takes the ladle from you. You've held up your end of the bargain. He reaches into a small pouch at his waist and counts out several cacao beans into your hand. He gives you a final, long look, then turns back to his work. You walk away, your heart thumping. You open your palm and stare at your earnings. 20 cacao beans. They feel solid, real. You now possess wealth. It's a ridiculously small amount, barely enough for a decent meal, but it feels like a fortune. You are no longer a complete outsider. You are a participant. You can buy something. Now you begin to understand the exchange rate on a personal level. You walk back into the heart of the market, looking at everything with new eyes. A plump avocado, maybe 3 beans, a handful of chili peppers, probably just one. You could buy a cup of itolai, a warm, thick corn gruel that smells wonderfully comforting. That would be about 5 beans. A woven bracelet, maybe 15. A rabbit for 10 beans now seems like a pretty good deal. This is the reality of the Aztec economy for the common person. Life was lived on a scale of a few beans at a time. A farmer might sell his surplus squash and walk away with 30 or 40 beans. A craftsman might spend a week on a piece of pottery and hope to get 100 beans for it. Your 20 beans are a laborer's daily wage. But what could a nobleman buy? The numbers become astronomical. A warrior's feathered costume could cost thousands of beans. A single, exquisitely crafted turquoise mosaic mask, the kind reserved for the highest echelates of society, could be worth several shikipilai bags of 8 zaro beans. This is where the cacao economy reveals the empire's deep social stratification. The gap between a commoner with a handful of beans and a noble who counted his wealth in entire sacks was immense. As you clutch your small fortune, you also become aware of a subtle danger. You are now a target. 20 beans might not be much, but to someone with nothing, it's worth stealing. You start holding them more tightly in your fist, your eyes scanning the crowd with a newfound caution. And then you discover a quirky, almost comical detail about this bean-based currency. The value of a cacao bean wasn't just in its potential to be traded. It was also, of course, a foodstuff. This created a unique economic dilemma. Imagine being poor and hungry, and your last few coins are not only money, but also edible. Do you spend them on other food, or do you make a drink out of your own cash? It's a strange temptation that doesn't exist with metal coins. Historians have noted this oddity, that the very medium of exchange was also a consumable luxury, blurring the line between wealth and sustenance. This dual nature of the cacao bean also led to some interesting variations in value. Not all beans were created equal. The finest beans, large, smooth, and perfectly formed, were reserved for the elite and for making the highest quality drinks. These were often called royal cacao. Smaller, broken, or imperfect beans were the ones that tended to circulate more freely in the market as currency. So there was an inherent grading system. This is a topic that archaeologists still explore, attempting to differentiate between currency grade and tribute grade cacao beans found in archaeological sites. They analyze the physical characteristics of preserved beans to understand how this stratification might have worked in practice. Were there official inspectors? Was the quality judged by eye, or was there a more formal system? The details remain elusive. You stand there, in the middle of the roaring Tenochtitlan market, with 20 cacao beans in your hand. You are faced with a choice. You could be practical. You could buy a hot meal, some fresh water, maybe even a piece of fruit. Or you could be ambitious. You could hold on to your newfound wealth, try to earn more, and perhaps one day understand the true power of this bean. But for now, you don't want to spend them. Not yet. You want to understand where they come from. What is their story? Who was the first to realize that this bitter seed held the key to an empire? You pocket your beans carefully. Your next quest is clear. You need to find someone who can tell you the origin story of cacao. Clutching your small pouch of 20 beans, you feel a shift in your purpose. You are no longer just a passive observer. You're an investigator. You need to understand the why behind the cacao bean. Why this specific bean? Why is it so revered? The market is a place of commerce. Of how much? For answers about why, you need to find a different kind of expert. You leave the Tenochtitlan market behind, its roar fading once again to a low hum. You make your way back towards the ceremonial precinct of Tenochtitlan, the place of temples and pyramids. This is where the priests reside, the keepers of history, mythology, and the sacred calendar. If anyone knows the story of cacao's divine origins, it will be them. Finding a priest willing to speak to a stranger like you is no easy task. You are met with dismissive glances and cold shoulders. But your persistence, your respectful demeanor, and perhaps the sheer novelty of your appearance eventually wear down one of the lower-ranking acolytes. He is young, his hair not yet as long and matted as the senior priests, but he carries the same air of solemnity. He agrees to speak with you, not out of kindness, but perhaps out of a scholarly curiosity about this strange outsider. He leads you to a quiet courtyard within the walls of a temple complex. The air here is thick with the smell of burning copal incense, a sweet, piney scent that seems to cling to the stone walls. He sits on a low stone bench and gestures for you to sit opposite him. He doesn't speak your language, and you don't speak his, but through a combination of gestures, drawings in the dirt, and the universal language of storytelling, a narrative begins to unfold. He tells you that cacao was not originally for mortals. It was the food of the gods, grown in their celestial paradise. He points to the sky, then mimes eating and looking blissful. The gods, he explains, kept this precious food for themselves, guarding it jealously. But there was one God who loved humanity, a God who walked among them, taught them arts, agriculture, and how to measure time. This was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. The priest scratches a serpentine form in the dirt, adding feathers along its back. Quetzalcoatl saw that humans were weary and sad, toiling endlessly just to survive. He believed they deserved something better, a taste of the divine joy that the gods kept for themselves. So, the priest continues, his hands becoming more animated. Quetzalcoatl undertook a daring theft. He traveled to the mountain of the gods, the mountain of sustenance, and there he stole the beloved cacao tree. He brought it down from the heavens and planted it in the earthly paradise of Tamo and Chan, a mythical place of origin for many Mesoamerican cultures. He then taught the Toltecs, the ancestors of the Aztecs, how to cultivate the tree, how to harvest its pods, and how to prepare the beans into the sacred drink. For a time, there was bliss. Humans had access to the food of the gods. They drank xocōlātl and became wise, strong, and content. But the other gods were furious. They were outraged at Quetzalcoatl's betrayal. Led by his rival, Tenochtitlan, the god of the night sky and trickery, they conspired against the feathered serpent. The priest's expression darkens. He tells a story of deception. Tenochtitlan, disguised as an old man, offered Quetzalcoatl a drink. It was not xocōlātl, but tulq, an alcoholic beverage made from the fermented sap of the magi plant. Quetzalcoatl drank it, became intoxicated, and in his drunkenness, broke his priestly vows of celibacy, shaming himself. When he awoke, filled with remorse and grief, he knew he could no longer rule. He was forced to abandon his people. He journeyed to the eastern coast and, depending on the version of the myth, either immolated himself and became the morning star, Venus, or sailed away on a raft of snakes, promising to one day return. After his departure, the other gods, in their anger, withered most of the cacao trees, allowing them to grow only in a few hidden, dark, and humid places, far from the central highlands. Cacao was once again a rare and precious substance, a reminder of a lost golden age. As the priest finishes his story, you sit in silence, processing the tale. It's a classic myth, a benevolent god, a forbidden fruit, a transgression, and a fall from grace. It perfectly explains the status of cacao. It's divine. It's a gift, but it's also rare and difficult to obtain, a remnant of a paradise lost. This is the mainstream version of the myth, the one that would have been known to many Aztecs. But, like all great myths, it has variations. One lesser-known detail is that in some versions, Quetzalcoatl doesn't just steal the cacao tree. He also steals maize. The story becomes an origin myth for all key agricultural products, tying cacao directly to the very sustenance of the people. And here lies a point of academic contention. For decades, historians and anthropologists have debated the role of this myth in the Spanish conquest. When Hernán Cortés arrived from the east in 1519, the same year that one version of the prophecy foretold Quetzalcoatl's return, did the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma. I truly believe Cortés was the returning god. Some early Spanish accounts, particularly those written years after the fact, heavily promote this narrative. It paints the Aztecs as superstitious and naive, and the conquest is a matter of divine will. However, many modern historians are highly skeptical. They argue that this Cortés's Quetzalcoatl story was likely a post-conquest invention, a justification created by the Spanish to legitimize their actions. Moctezuma was a savvy political leader, they argue, and was more likely treating Cortés as a potential threat or a foreign dignitary, not a god. The truth of what was really in Moctezuma's mind is one of history's great unsolved mysteries. The young priest rises, signaling that the audience is over. He has shared the sacred story, the justification for why those 20 beans in your pouch feel so significant. They are not just money. They are a direct link to the gods, a tangible piece of a divine drama. You bow your head in thanks, and as you walk away from the temple precinct, the world feels different. The city is no longer just a marvel of engineering. It is a stage for gods and mortals. And the cacao bean is the central prop in their epic tale. You now know the why. Your next step must be to find the where. You need to see with your own eyes the hot, humid lands where the food of the gods is still permitted to grow. You have the myth, a grand, sweeping story that gives the cacao bean its divine weight. You have your 20 beans, a tiny stake in this complex economy. But the story feels incomplete. The priest spoke of hot, humid lands where the cacao trees were banished to grow. Tenochtitlan, with its cool, thin, high-altitude air, is emphatically not that place. To truly understand cacao, you realize you have to leave the magnificent city and journey to its source. This is not a simple undertaking. The Aztec Empire was vast, and its most productive cacao-growing regions were in the tropical lowlands of xocōlātl, modern-day xocōlātl, on the Pacific coast near what is now the border of Mexico and Guatemala. This was a tributary province, hundreds of miles away, a world apart from the Valley of Mexico. Finding a way to get there is your next challenge. You are not a merchant with a caravan of porters, nor a soldier on campaign. You are, for all intents and purposes, a nobody. You spend days near the causeways, watching the flow of people and goods, looking for an opportunity. You use your tiny fund of cacao beans sparingly, buying just enough roasted maize and water to get by. Your chance comes in the form of a merchant caravan preparing to leave the city. It's not a glamorous affair. This caravan deals in bulk goods, salt, obsidian tools, and textiles which they will trade in the southern provinces for exotic goods like jaguar pelts, brilliant quetzal feathers, and, most importantly, cacao. The caravan master is a gruff, practical man. He has no use for a passenger, but he does have use for a strong back. Through gestures and a desperate attitude, you manage to convey your desire to work in exchange for passage. After scrutinizing you for a long moment, sizing you up, he agrees. You are assigned to be a porter. You are given a caca, XTLI, the standard Aztec carrying frame. It's a simple but effective wooden backpack that allows a heavy load to be supported by a TUM line, a strap passed across your forehead. The weight of the pack is borne not by your shoulders, but by your neck and spine. It's an ergonomic design that the people here have perfected over centuries. Your load is a heavy bale of salt, a precious commodity in the tropics where it is scarce. Leaving Tenochtitlan is the reverse of your arrival. The grand city recedes behind you, sinking back into the lake, until it is once again just a smudge on the horizon. The journey is arduous. The first part takes you through the Central Valley, past other cities and towns, along well-maintained roads. But soon, the terrain begins to change. You start to climb, up into the pine and oak forested mountains that ring the valley. The air gets even thinner, and the nights are cold. Your body, unaccustomed to the altitude and the physical strain, aches constantly. The TUM line digs into your forehead, and your neck and leg muscles burn with an intensity you've never known. You are now part of the logistical network that held the Aztec Empire together. There were no wheeled vehicles and no draft animals like horses or oxen. The entire empire was supplied by human power, by endless lines of porters, or tele-MEH, like you. A standard load was about 50 pounds, and a porter was expected to carry it for about 15 miles a day. They were the lifeblood of the empire, a walking, breathing supply chain. As you travel, you notice something interesting. The caravan is not just merchants and porters. There are also a few men who walk separately, who don't carry loads, and who seem to be observing everything. They are the Poctec, a powerful and privileged class of long-distance merchants. But they were more than that. They often served a dual role as spies for the emperor, gathering intelligence about the wealth, political climate, and military strength of the provinces they visited. This is a fascinating bit of Aztec statecraft that historians have pieced together from various codices and accounts. The Poctec were the vanguard of the empire, their commercial activities often paving the way for military conquest. The man who hired you might be just a simple caravan master, but he could also be an agent of the state. After weeks of walking, you cross the high mountain passes and begin your descent. The change is dramatic. The cool, dry air becomes thick, warm, and heavy with moisture. The pine forests give way to a dense, suffocating light-green jungle. The sounds change, too. The whisper of wind in the pines is replaced by a cacophony of screeching birds, buzzing insects, and the eerie calls of howler monkeys. This is the Tierra Caliente, the heartland. You feel a constant sheen of sweat on your skin. The world is alive and teeming, and much of it seems to want to bite you. It's a challenging environment, and you realize why the Aztecs prized the goods from here. They were difficult and dangerous to acquire. A strange and slightly gruesome tidbit you learn along the way concerns a particular red dye. You see, some of the textiles in your caravan are brilliant, deep crimson. You learn the dye comes not from a plant, but from an insect, the cacao. These tiny insects live on prickly pear cacti. They are painstakingly harvested, dried, and crushed to produce carminic acid, the source of the red dye. It was one of the most valuable exports from the New World to the Old after the conquest, producing a red far more vibrant than anything available in Europe. It's another example of the sophisticated use of natural resources you see everywhere. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of walking, you arrive in the province of xocōlātl. The air here is so thick with humidity it feels like you can drink it. And everywhere you look, you see it. Growing in the shaded understory of the taller rainforest trees, protected from the direct sun, are the cacao trees. They are not particularly tall or majestic, rather spindly and unassuming. But hanging directly from their trunks and thickest branches are the things you came all this way to see, the cacao pods. They are magnificent, larger than you imagine, ranging in color from vibrant green to yellow, orange, and a deep purplish red. They look like alien footballs, ridged and pointed. You've made it. You are at the source. This is the cradle of cacao, the place where the food of the gods condescends to grow on earth. You've arrived, but your work isn't done. The caravan master sets up in a local village, and the bartering begins. The sultan tools you carried on your back are now traded for the local treasures. While the merchants are busy, you have a chance to slip away and finally get a closer look at the cacao groves. You follow a local farmer, a man whose family has likely cultivated cacao for generations, into the shaded forest. The plantation, though it feels more like a managed garden than a modern farm, is a world of dappled light and deep, damp earth. The cacao trees, the Obame cacao, are protected by taller trees, which the farmer calls mother trees. He explains, through a mix of gestures and local dialect that you're slowly beginning to decipher, that the cacao tree is delicate. It needs the shade of the larger trees to protect it from the harsh sun and strong winds. It's a symbiotic relationship, a carefully balanced ecosystem. The farmer walks through the grove with an expert eye, scanning the trees, HES looking for pods of the perfect ripeness. He points out a pod that is a deep, rich red. That one is ready. He carries a long pole with a curved blade at the end. With a deft movement, he hooks the blade around the thick stem of the pod and gives a sharp twist. The pod comes free and falls to the ground with a soft thud. He does this again and again, his movements economical and precise. He never damages the delicate flower cushions on the trunk from which new pods will grow. He picks up one of the pods and hands it to you. It's surprisingly heavy, and the skin is thick and leathery. It feels ancient, primal. He takes out a short, heavy knife, like a small machete, and with a few sharp, careful whacks, he splits the pod open lengthwise. The sight inside is completely unexpected. You were expecting to see neat rows of brown beans, the kind you held in your hand in the market. Instead, the inside of the pod is filled with a white, sticky, almost slimy pulp. Embedded within this pulp are about 30 to 50 seeds, the fresh cacao beans. They are pale, almost purplish white, and look nothing like the dark, hard currency you're familiar with. The farmer scoops out a finger FUL of the white pulp and offers it to you. You hesitate for a moment, then cautiously taste it. It's a revelation. It's not bitter or chocolatey at all. It's sweet, tangy, and refreshing, with a flavor somewhere between lychee, mango, and citrus. It's delicious. This pulp, you learn, was often eaten as a snack or fermented into a mildly alcoholic beverage, completely separate from the eventual use of the beans themselves. This is a fact that often gets lost in the history of chocolate. The fruit itself was a food source long before the seeds were prized. The farmer and his family gather the harvested pods into baskets. They sit together, breaking them open and scooping out the pulp-covered beans with their hands. It's a communal, labor-intensive process. The empty husks are discarded on the forest floor, where they will decompose and return their nutrients to the soil. Nothing is wasted. You ask the farmer, using your slowly growing vocabulary of gestures, if you can try to harvest one. He smiles, a rare and genuine expression, and hands you the long pole. It's heavier and more awkward than it looks. You pick out a ripe-looking pod and try to hook the blade around the stem. Your first attempt misses completely. Your second scrapes the bark of the tree, and you get a disapproving frown from the farmer. You realize the deep skill involved in this seemingly simple task. On your third try, you manage to hook it and twist. The pod tumbles to the ground. You feel a small, ridiculous surge of pride. You've just participated in the very first step of chocolate's journey. It's a moment of connection, bridging the gap between the grand mythology and the earthly reality. The divine food of quetzalcoatl doesn't spring forth as a finished product. It starts here, with a heavy, colorful fruit, a sweet, sticky pulp, and a pale, unassuming seed. Now, a point of contention among botanists and archaeologists is the exact geographic origin of Theobarma cacao. While the Mesoamericans, like the Aztecs and Maya, were the first to cultivate it and develop the chocolate culture we know, genetic studies suggest the tree may have originated even further south, in the upper Amazon basin. The theory goes that the tree and its uses slowly migrated north over thousands of years. So, while the Aztecs perfected the use of cacao, they may not have been the first humans to ever encounter it. The very first people to crack open a pod and taste the sweet pulp might have lived thousands of miles away and thousands of years earlier. The story of who first discovered cacao is likely lost to prehistory. One other fascinating tidbit from this stage is the name itself. The scientific name, Theobarma cacao, was given to the tree in the 18th century by the Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus. Theobarma is Greek for food of the gods. Linnaeus, clearly a fan, was directly referencing the Aztec myths you heard from the priest. So, the divine status of cacao is permanently encoded in its modern, scientific classification. The beans are now piled on large green leaves on the ground, a sticky, white mound. They look nothing like money and taste nothing like chocolate. The farmer explains that the real magic, the transformation from a sweet, fruity seed to a bitter, complex being, is about to begin. It's a process of decay and rebirth, a process of fermentation, You follow the farmer from the cacao grove to a clearing near his thatched roof home. He points to a large pile of banana leaves and then to the baskets filled with the fresh, pulp-covered cacao beans. The next stage, he communicates, is crucial. This is where the bean finds its soul. The beans, still enveloped in their sugary weight cup, are heaped onto the ground in a mound. Then, they are covered with a thick layer of banana leaves, creating a warm, humid, and enclosed environment. And then, you wait. This is fermentation, a process that sounds simple but is actually a complex, multi-stage biochemical ballet. For the first 2 days, not much seems to be happening from the outside, but under the leaves, quiet miracle is taking place. The yeasts that are naturally present in the air and on the surface of the leaves begin to feast on the sweet pulp. They are converting the sugars into alcohol, just like in the making of wine or beer. The pile starts to heat up, and a faint, sweet, boozy smell begins to emanate from it. The farmer comes in, using a large wooden paddle, turns the entire pile of beans, moving the ones from the outside to the center and vice versa. This is to ensure even fermentation and to aerate the mass. He explains that this turning is critical. If he doesn't do it, the beans won't develop the right flavor. After about 2 days, the second stage of fermentation kicks in. The alcohol produced by the yeast creates the perfect environment for bacteria, specifically lactic acid bacteria, the same kind found in yogurt, to thrive. They begin to convert the alcohol and remaining sugars into lactic acid, contributing a tangy, sour note to the developing flavor profile. Finally, in the last few days of the process, another type of bacteria, acetic acid bacteria, the same kind that turns wine into vinegar, takes over. They convert the alcohol into acetic acid. This is the most dramatic part of the process. The temperature inside the pile can soar to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, around 50 degrees Celsius. The combination of high heat and the acid does two very important things. First, it kills the germ of the cacao bean, preventing it from sprouting. A sprouted bean is useless for making chocolate. Second, and most importantly, this is when the flavor precursors of chocolate are born. The heat and acid break down the cell walls within the bean, allowing complex chemical reactions to occur. The bitter polyphenols, the antioxidants, and the unchocolatey proteins mix and mingle, creating the foundational flavor compounds that we will later recognize as chocolate. Without this fermentation process, the beans would just taste bitter and astringent. They would never develop the rich, fruity, and complex notes that make chocolate so desirable. It is, quite literally, a controlled rot. The farmer is harnessing the power of microorganisms to transform the raw material. You lean closer to the pile. The smell has changed. It's no longer just sweet and boozy. It's now pungent, acidic, and complex, with hints of vinegar, fruit, and something deeply earthy. It's a surprisingly strong and not entirely pleasant smell. It's the smell of transformation. One of the quirky, lesser-known details of this process is the sheer variety of methods used. While covering the beans with banana leaves is common, different regions had different techniques. Some used wooden boxes with drainage holes, creating a more controlled environment. Others might dig pits in the ground. The specific local yeasts and bacteria also had a huge impact on the final flavor. A cacao bean fermented in xocōlātl would have a different microbial fingerprint, and thus a different flavor profile than one fermented in another region. It's a concept that modern craft chocolate makers are very familiar with. Tiraya. The idea that the unique environment of a place imparts a unique flavor to the final product. The Aztecs may not have had the scientific vocabulary for it, but they absolutely understood the concept in practice. The exact duration and method of fermentation is a subject of ongoing research, both for historians and for modern chocolate companies. How did the Aztecs perfect this process without understanding the microbiology behind it? It was thousands of years of trial and error, of passing down knowledge from one generation to the next. Historians and archaeologists studying ancient ceramics sometimes find residue that they can analyze. By looking at the chemical markers left behind, they can try to reconstruct ancient food processing techniques. Did the Aztecs have a specific fermentation time they preferred? Did they add other ingredients to the fermentation pile to alter the flavor? These are questions that are still being investigated, a puzzle being pieced together one microscopic clue at a time. The debate over whether the box or heap fermentation method produces superior results continues to this day among artisanal chocolate makers, echoing ancient practices. After about 5 to 7 days, the farmer decides the process is complete. He removes the banana leaves. The beans are now transformed. The sticky white pulp has mostly drained away, and the beans themselves have changed color, from a pale lavender to a richer, reddish brown. They are still wet and swollen, but they now carry the promise of their final flavor. You have witnessed the most critical, and perhaps least glamorous, part of the cacao journey. You've seen how nature's smallest organisms are used to unlock the divine flavor hidden within the bean. The next step is to preserve this flavor and prepare the beans for their long journey back to the heart of the empire. The fermentation is over, but the beans are still wet, swollen, and vulnerable to mold. To make them last for the long journey to Tenochtitlan and for storage, sometimes for years they must be thoroughly dried. This next stage is a battle against the region's suffocating humidity. The farmer and his family carry the fermented beans in wide, shallow baskets to a large, flat, open area, a patio paved with sun-baked clay. They spread the beans out in a thin, even layer under the full, blazing force of the tropical sun. The sheer number of beans is staggering, covering a space the size of a large room. It looks like a carpet of glistening, brownish-purple jewels. Your job, should you choose to accept it, and you do, because you are committed to seeing this process through, is to rake them. You are given a simple wooden rake and shown the technique. You must constantly rake and turn the beans, exposing all their surfaces to the sun and the air. This prevents them from clumping together and ensures they dry evenly. If they dry too quickly on the outside, moisture can be trapped inside, leading to rot. If they dry too slowly, mold can take hold. It's a delicate balance. The work is hot and monotonous. The sun beats down on your back, and the air is thick and still. The sweet, vinegary smell of the fermented beans is ever present. You walk back and forth across the patio, your rake making a soft, shuffling sound as it moves the beans. You are part of a human machine, a team of people all focused on this single, crucial task. Children, too young for heavy labor but old enough to help, use their bare feet to shuffle through the beans, their laughter echoing across the patio. As you rake, you can feel the beans changing. They start off plump and soft, but as the days pass, they shrink, harden, and darken. Their color deepens from a reddish brown to the rich, dark mahogany you recognize from the marketplace. You occasionally pick one up. It feels lighter each day. You can hear the change, too. When you first started raking, the sound was dull and soft. Now, as the beans dry, the rake produces a satisfying, rattling click-clack, the sound of dry beans skittering across the clay. This is the sound of shelf-stable currency being created. This sun-drying method is the most traditional way to do it. However, it's also at the mercy of the weather. A sudden tropical downpour could be disastrous. The farmer keeps a wary eye on the sky at all times. On some days, clouds gather, and there's a frantic rush to gather the beans into sacks and move them under cover before the rain comes. Here you learn a fascinating, if slightly off-putting, detail. In some regions where the rainy season made sun drying impossible, a different method was used, fire drying. The beans would be spread on a platform of sticks, and a low, smoky fire would be lit underneath. This dried the beans effectively but also imparted a heavy, smoky, almost ham-like flavor to them. This smoke-damaged cacao was considered inferior, the lowest grade of bean. The Spanish, upon their arrival, absolutely detested it. Yet, for some isolated communities, it was the only way to preserve their harvest. This distinction between sun-dried and fire-dried beans was a major quality differentiator that affected the exchange rate of the beans significantly. The question of quality control during the drying process is another area where historians have to do some detective work. How did they know when the beans were perfectly dry? There was no electronic moisture meter. It was all done by feel, by sound, and by sight. An experienced farmer could crack a bean open and know by its snapping the appearance of the interior if it was ready. Modern science tells us the ideal moisture content is between 6 full by 500 T. The Aztecs achieved this through pure sensory expertise, a skill honed over countless generations. Was this system perfect? Of course not. Archaeologists sometimes find caches of ancient beans that were improperly dried and have gone moldy. A small, preserved failure from 1,000 years ago. The debate among experts revolves around how standardized this process really was. Was there a master dryer in each village, or was it a skill every family possessed? The level of centralization in quality control is still an open question. After about a week or two, depending on the sun and humidity, the farmer declares the beans ready. He picks one up, wakes it between his fingers. It makes a sharp cracking sound. He nods in satisfaction. They are done. The beans are now hard, dry, and stable. They have lost more than half their original weight. They are swept up and poured into large woven sacks, each sack destined to hold exactly 8 xocōlātl. This is the standard unit of tribute, the form in which this wealth will be transported to the emperor. You watch as they count, a rhythmic chant of numbers in a local dialect. You have now witnessed the complete transformation from a sweet, pulpy fruit to a pile of fermented, dried seeds. These beans are no longer just a potential food. They are a commodity. They are ready for their long journey to the capital. And so are you. Your work as a farmhand is over. It's time to rejoin the caravan, this time carrying a much more precious cargo. Your return journey is different. You are no longer carrying coarse salt, but the treasure you came to find. The caravan master assigns you a new load, a sack containing a full xocōlātl of 8 xocōlātl, sun-dried cacao beans. The weight is roughly the same as the salt, but the psychological weight is entirely different. You are carrying a small fortune on your back. The T you impline on your forehead feels less like a mark of labor and more like a yoke of responsibility. The journey back up into the mountains is just as grueling, but your perspective has changed. You are no longer just a laborer. You are a guardian of wealth. Every step you take is bringing this precious commodity closer to the heart of the empire. You are a tiny, walking cog in the vast machine of the Aztec tribute system. This system was the economic backbone of the empire. Conquered provinces were not typically occupied by large Aztec armies or repopulated with Aztec citizens. Instead, they were required to pay a regular tax, or tribute, to the emperor and Tenochtitlan. This tribute took the form of whatever goods the province specialized in. For xocōlātl, it was cacao. For the coastal regions, it was dried fish and salt. For other areas, it was cotton textiles, warrior costumes, jade, turquoise, or exotic bird feathers. These tribute lists were meticulously recorded by imperial scribes in documents we now call codices. One of the most famous surviving examples is the Codex Mendoza, created a few years after the Spanish conquest. It provides an incredibly detailed picture of the imperial economy. It lists hundreds of towns, each with a pictogram representing the specific goods and quantities they owed the emperor twice or 4 times a year. For example, The entry for xocōlātl shows a drawing of a cacao tree next to symbols representing 200 loads of cacao beans, its imperial accounting made visible. As you walk, you start to understand the sheer scale of this operation. You are just one porter in one caravan, but all across the empire. Thousands of other TLMMEH are also walking, all carrying the wealth of the provinces towards the central nexus of Tenochtitlan. It was a constant, flowing river of goods, all converging on the capital. Halfway through your journey, your caravan meets another group traveling in the same direction. This is not a merchant caravan. It's an official tribute procession. The porters are flanked by armed Aztec warriors, their obsidian-bladed clubs, or xocōlātl, held at the ready. The atmosphere is more formal, less like a commercial venture and more like a military operation. They are carrying not just cacao, but also massive bales of brilliantly colored feathers, likely from the quetzal, a bird whose long, iridescent tail feathers were more valuable than gold. Here you learn a strange detail about the logistics of the empire. The porters carrying this tribute were not Aztecs from the capital. They were people from the conquered provinces themselves, forced to carry the fruits of their own land and labor all the way to Tenochtitlan as part of their tribute obligation. Imagine the resentment that must have brewed, having to haul your own wealth for weeks over mountains, only to hand it over to your conquerors. This system, while efficient for the Aztecs, created deep-seated anger in the provinces, a fact the Spanish would later exploit to find local allies. This leads to a classic historical debate. Was the Aztec Empire a true, integrated empire, or was it more of a hegemonic or tributary empire? A traditional empire, like the Roman one, would have built roads, established garrisons, and imposed its own culture and language throughout its territories. The Aztecs did this to a much lesser extent. Their control was primarily economic, based on the threat of military force. As long as the tribute flowed, the local rulers were often left in place to govern their own people. This hands-off approach made the empire easier to expand, but it also made it inherently unstable. It was a collection of resentful city-states, held together by fear. This fragility is a key factor that historians point to when explaining the speed of its collapse. Your caravan eventually joins the larger tribute procession, seeking safety in numbers. The presence of the warriors makes the journey feel safer, but also more tense. The road is no longer just a path. It is an artery of the state. You see evidence of the state's power along the way. At certain points, you pass through fortified garrisons, strategic outposts that secured the tribute routes. You also see relay stations, small huts spaced every few miles apart. These were for the imperial runners, the PNR. These men were the empire's express mail service. They would run in short, high-speed sprints from one station to the next, passing messages, or even small, high-value goods like fresh fish from the coast for the emperor's table. It was said that a message could travel from the Gulf Coast to Tenochtitlan, a distance of over 200 miles, in just 24 hours. It was another incredible feat of human-powered logistics. Weeks later, you see them again, the snow-capped volcanoes that guard the Valley of Mexico. And then, the shimmering waters of Lake Texcoco. As you walk the final causeway back into the city, you are no longer the lost, destitute stranger who left. You are part of a procession of power. The sack on your back is no longer yours. It belongs to the emperor. You have successfully delivered the food of the gods to the city of the gods, and now you will finally see how it is prepared for its divine purpose. Upon re-entering Tenochtitlan, you are no longer a simple porter. You are part of an official tribute delivery. The sacks of cacao, along with the other goods, are not taken to the Tlatelolco market but are escorted directly to a vast complex of buildings near the Temple Omer. This is the imperial storehouse, the Tlatelolco. It's a state-run warehouse, the final destination for the river of tribute you witnessed on the road. The storehouse is a hive of activity, Scribes with codices stand at the entrance, meticulously recording every sack that enters. The cargo is weighed, or rather, counted and checked for quality. A royal steward, the man of high rank, inspects the beans your caravan has delivered. He plunges his hand into a sack, lets the beans run through his fingers, and breaks a few open to check their color and aroma. He is looking for signs of mold, smoke damage, or counterfeit beans. A nod from him means the tribute is accepted. Your duty as a porter is complete. The caravan master pays you for your labor not with money, but with a portion of the goods he traded for on his own account, a small bag of salt and a few handfuls of dried chilies. It's a meager payment for such an arduous journey, but it's more than you had. More importantly, you have gained access and knowledge. You linger near the storehouses, driven by your quest to see the final stages of the cacao's transformation. Through a combination of persistent observation and a bit of luck, you manage to get a glimpse into one of the kitchens attached to the noble palaces. This is where the cacao for the elite is prepared. It's a large, open-air kitchen, bustling with women who move with unpracticed grace. The first thing you see is the roasting. A woman is sitting on the ground before a flat, circular clay griddle called a camel, which rests on 3 stones over a low, charcoal fire. She has a shallow ceramic bowl filled with the dark, dried cacao beans you carried all this way. She carefully pours a small amount of the beans onto the hot camel. The process is one of constant motion. She uses a small brush made of stiff grass to continuously stir and turn the beans. The goal is not to cook them aggressively, but to toast them gently and evenly. This is a critical flavor developing step. Roasting reduces the bitterness and acidity that remains from fermentation and unlocks the deep, rich aromas that we associate with chocolate. If the beans are under-roasted, the flavor will be weak and vegetal. If they are over-roasted, they will taste burnt and acrid. A warm, nutty, and intensely fragrant aroma begins to fill the air. It's a smell that is both familiar and new. It's undeniably the scent of chocolate, but it's purer, darker, and more intense than anything you've ever smelled. It lacks the sugary sweetness you're used to. Instead, it has earthy, fruity, and slightly floral undertones. This is the pure, unadulterated essence of the bean being awakened by the heat. The woman roasting the beans is an artist. She doesn't use a timer. She judges the beans' readiness by their color, the way they smell, and the sound they make. As they roast, the beans start to swell and crackle, making a soft popping sound as the skin begins to separate from the bean inside, much like popcorn. This is the sign that they are nearly done. One of the lesser-known details of this process is the potential for other ingredients to be added during roasting. While pure cacao was common, some historical sources suggest that certain spices, like the seeds of the potax tea tree, a cousin of cacao, Theobama bacor, might have been roasted alongside the cacao beans to add different flavor dimensions. The potax tea beans were fattier and had a milder flavor, and they were sometimes used to stretch the more valuable cacao or to create a different kind of beverage altogether. The exact temperature and duration of the roast is, of course, a major point of discussion for historians and modern calculators alike. How hot was a pre-Hispanic camel? Archaeologists have tried to replicate these conditions to find out. By analyzing the wear patterns and carbon scoring on ancient camels, they can estimate the temperatures they were subjected to. The consensus is that it was likely a low and slow roast, probably around 250-300 degrees Fahrenheit, 120-150 Celsius, which is consistent with modern craft chocolate making techniques for preserving delicate flavor notes. The debate continues, however, on how much variation there was. Did a roast for the emperor's drink differ from a roast for a common warrior's beverage? Did they roast differently depending on the origin of the bean? These are the fine details that are still being explored. Once the woman is satisfied with the roast, she sweeps the beans from the camel into a woven basket to cool. The air is now thick with the intoxicating perfume of freshly roasted cacao. The beans are a deep, lustrous brown, and they feel warm and light to the touch. They are now brittle and fragile, their inner structure transformed by the heat. You watch, mesmerized. You have seen the bean born from its pod, fermented in the jungle heat, and dried under the tropical sun. You've carried it over mountains, and now you've seen it awakened by fire. The journey is nearing its end. The next step is to shed its final layer, to peel away the thin, papery shell and reveal the true heart of the cacao, the nib. The freshly roasted beans have cooled, their rich aroma filling the kitchen courtyard. The next stage is shelling, a task that, like so many others in this process, is done entirely by hand. It's a painstaking but necessary step to get to the pure essence of the bean. You watch as a group of women sit on woven mats on the ground, shallow baskets of the roasted beans in their laps. Each woman takes a handful of beans and gently rolls them between her palms. The roasting has made the outer shell, or husk, brittle and papery, and it separates easily from the bean inside. The motion is gentle, almost meditative. They are not crushing the beans, merely loosening the skins. After a few moments of rolling, a woman holds her hands up to the wind, which blows steadily through the open-air kitchen. She slowly pours the mixture of broken shells and beans from one hand to the other. It's a simple but brilliant technique called winnowing. The wind catches the light, papery husks and carries them away, a small, fluttering cloud of brown chaff. The heavier, denser pieces of the bean fall directly down into her hand. She repeats this several times until only the clean, broken pieces of the bean remain. What's left in her hand are cacao nibs. This is the pure, unadulterated heart of the chocolate. They are jagged, dark brown morsels, and the concentration of the chocolate aroma coming from them is intense. The shelling process looks simple, but it requires a certain finesse. If the beans are under-roasted, the shell will stick. If they are over-roasted, the nibs will be too brittle and turn to dust. The skill of the roaster is directly tested by the ease of the sheller. You are offered a chance to try. You take a handful of the warm beans. They feel light and fragile. You roll them in your palms, feeling the satisfying crackle as the shells break. Then you attempt to winnow. You pour the mixture from one hand to the other, but your timing is off. You either drop half the nibs on the ground or fail to catch the wind, leaving a messy mix of shell and dip in your hand. One of the women laughs, a gentle, musical sound, and then shows you again, her movements fluid and efficient. It's a skill born of thousands of repetitions. And what happened to all those husks? They weren't just thrown away. This is a culture that wasted very little. Cacao husks could be boiled in water to create a thin, weak, but still flavorful tea. This cacao tea was likely a common, everyday beverage for those who couldn't afford the precious beans themselves. It was a way to get a hint of the luxurious flavor without using the valuable nibs. It's a fascinating bit of food history, a secondary product that allowed the flavor of cacao to be enjoyed more widely across the social spectrum. Think of it as the diet chocolate of the Aztec world. The purity of the nibs was paramount for a high-quality drink. Any bits of shell left in the mix would result in a gritty, unpleasant texture. This is a problem that modern chocolate makers, with their powerful winnowing machines, still have to solve. The debate in the Aztec kitchen, as it is in the modern factory, would have been about efficiency versus purity. How much time do you spend getting that last tiny speck of shell out? For a drink intended for the emperor, the standards would have been impossibly high. For a more common preparation, a little bit of shell might have been acceptable. The question of what, exactly, constituted a cacao nib to the Aztecs is a subtle point that historians and archaeobotanists consider. The nib is not a single solid piece. It's made up of the two cotyledons, the embryonic leaves of the seed, and the small germ, or rootlet. The germ is particularly bitter and astringent. Did Aztec cooks meticulously remove this tiny germ from every single nib to create a smoother, less bitter product. Some sources suggest they might have for the highest grade preparations. This would have been an incredibly tedious and time-consuming process, a true labor of love reserved for the most discerning palates. It's a level of refinement that is debated, but it shows the potential depth of their culinary artistry. You manage to discreetly pick up a single, clean cacao nib and pop it into your mouth. The texture is crunchy and slightly waxy. The flavor is an explosion. It's intensely bitter, like the darkest of dark coffees, but it's also complex. You taste notes of dried fruit, nuts, and a deep, earthy richness. There is absolutely no sweetness. It's a powerful, stimulating flavor that feels more like a drug than a food. It's raw and untamed. Chewing on this nib, you finally understand the essence of xocōlātl on a chemical level. This is the source of the energy, the focus, the divine connection. The women have now produced several large bowls of clean, pure cacao nibs. The air is thick with their potent fragrance. The waste product, the shells, have been swept away. The raw material is now fully prepared. The stage is set for the final, magical transformation, the grinding, the process that will turn these hard, jagged nibs into a smooth, flowing paste, the literal liquor of the chocolate. The piles of clean, dark cacao nibs are ready. The kitchen moves into its next phase, and the centerpiece of this operation is an object you've seen before in the market but never in use, the mythology. It's a simple but incredibly effective grinding stone, a piece of technology that has been central to Mesoamerican cuisine for thousands of years. It consists of two parts, a flat, sloping stone slab, often with three short legs, made from vesicular basalt, a volcanic rock with a naturally abrasive surface. The second part is a stone rolling pin, called a mano. This is the tool that will transform the solid nibs into a liquid. A woman kneels at the head of the meat. She has placed a small, slow-burning charcoal fire underneath the stone slab. This is a crucial detail. The heat from the fire gently warms the stone. She tests the temperature with her hand, waiting for it to be just right, not hot enough to scorch the nibs, but warm enough to help release their natural fat. This fat is cocoa butter, and it makes up about 50% of the cacao nib's weight. It is solid at room temperature, but it melts just below body temperature. Warming the meat is the key to a smooth grind. She takes a handful of nibs and places them on the high end of the sloping stone. Then, with the mano in her hands, she begins to grind. It's a full body motion. She leans forward, using her weight and the strength of her arms and back to push the mano down and across the nibs, crushing them against the rough surface of the meat. The sound is mesmerizing. It's a rhythmic, gritty, scraping sound, the song of stone on stone, breaking down the structure of the nibs. At first, the nibs just crumble into a coarse, gravelly powder, but she is relentless. She scoops the powder back to the top of the stone and grinds again. And again. Her movements are strong and rhythmic, a practice dance of pressure and motion. Then, the magic begins. As she continues to grind, the friction and the heat from the warm stone begin to melt the cocoa butter. The dry, crumbly powder starts to darken, to glisten, and to clump together. With each pass of the mano, it becomes smoother and more cohesive. Slowly, miraculously, the solid nibs are transforming into a thick, dark, oozing paste. This is the chocolate liquor. It's not alcoholic. Of course, the term liquor refers to any liquid extracted from a solid. The paste slowly runs down the slope of the meat and drips off the end into a waiting ceramic bowl. It is thick, glossy, and has the consistency of warm peanut butter. The aroma is overwhelming, the purest, most intense chocolate scent imaginable. Watching this process, you understand the immense labor involved. To produce just a small bowl of this chocolate paste requires an incredible amount of time and physical exertion. This is why the drink was a luxury. It wasn't just the rarity of the beans. It was the human energy required to prepare them. A lesser-known fact about the meat aid is its versatility. This same tool was used to grind everything in the Aztec kitchen. Before grinding the cacao, a woman might have used it to grind dried maize that had been soaked in an alkaline solution, a process called nixtamalization, to make dough for tortillas. She would have to scrub the meat aid meticulously between uses to prevent the flavors from mingling unless, of course, she wanted them to. And this brings up an interesting, and still debated, point among food historians. Did the Aztecs ever mix maize directly with the cacao during the grinding process? Some recipes for xocōlātl call for maize flour, or dough as a thickener. It's possible that roasted maize kernels were ground right alongside the cacao nibs, creating a blended paste from the very beginning. Others argue the maize flour would have been prepared separately and added later, when the drink was mixed. The archaeological evidence is ambiguous. Residue analysis on ancient meat can show traces of both maize and cacao, but it can't tell us if they were ground simultaneously or one after the other. It's a subtle culinary question that speaks to the different ways the final drink could be constructed. You look at the woman grinding. Her brow is beaded with sweat, her muscles taut with effort. This is not work for the faint of heart. The quality of the final drink depended entirely on the skill and stamina of the person grinding. A lazy or inexperienced grinder would produce a gritty, lumpy paste, resulting in a drink with a sandy, unpleasant texture. To get a silky smooth consistency required grinding the paste over and over again, sometimes for hours, until the particle size was microscopically small. The idea of particle size is something modern chocolate makers obsess over, using giant, high-tech machines called refiners to get their chocolate perfectly smooth. The Aztec woman with her meat aid was trying to achieve the same goal through pure physical power and skill. The smoothness of the emperor's chocolate was a direct reflection of the effort expended by the women in his kitchen. The bowl at the end of the meat aid is now half full with a thick, dark, fragrant mass. This is the base, the pure, unflavored, 100% cacao paste. It could be shaped into discs or blocks, left to harden, and stored for later use. But this batch is not for storage. It's destined for a cup. It's ready for the final additions, the spices and flavorings that will turn this potent paste into the legendary bitter water, the drink of the gods. The bowl of freshly ground cacao paste sits in the center of the kitchen, a dark, glossy pool of potential. It is the heart of the drink, but it is not yet the finished product. Now comes the part of the process that is pure culinary art, the addition of flavors. The women of the kitchen now look like alchemists, assembling ingredients from a variety of bowls and pouches. This is the Aztec spice cabinet, and it contains a world of flavors far beyond simple bitterness. The first and most important addition, the one that truly defines the classic Aztec xocōlātl, is chili. A woman takes several small, dried red chili peppers. She removes the stems and seeds and grinds them into a fine powder on a small, separate stone, mortar, and pestle. You see several different types of chilies in the kitchen, ranging from long, dark ones that you guess are mild and smoky, to tiny, fiery red ones that look dangerous. The choice of chili would dramatically alter the final drink, creating variations from a gentle, warming spice to a searing, sweat-inducing heat. Next comes the vanilla. You see it not as an extract in a bottle, but in its original form, long, black, shriveled pods. These are the cured seed pods of a specific type of orchid, native to the tropical regions of Mexico. Vanilla was a highly prized luxury good. A woman takes one of the pods, splits it open with a small knife, and scrapes out the thousands of tiny, black seeds inside. The fragrance is sweet, floral, and incredibly aromatic. It's a scent that pairs perfectly with the dark bitterness of the cacao, softening its edges and adding a layer of complex perfume. Then you see a small bowl of what looks like tiny reed seeds. This is an oto, or achio. The seeds come from the pod of the achio tree. When ground and mixed with water, they produce a vibrant, reddish-orange pigment. The primary purpose of achio in the drink was not for flavor. It has a mild, slightly peppery taste, but for color. It was used to give the xocōlātl a rich, reddish hue, sometimes to imitate the color of blood, which had deep ritual significance. A drink for warrior ceremony might have a heavy dose of achio to give it a fierce, blood-red appearance. You also see a bowl of finely ground cornmeal. This is maize, the staff of life, and it plays a key role here as well. The cornmeal was used as a thickener, giving the drink more body and substance, making it more of a thin gruel than a watery beverage. It also added a subtle, sweet, earthy flavor and, more importantly, made the drink more nutritious and filling. This was the energy bar component of the drink, providing slow-release carbohydrates. But the flavorings didn't stop there. This is where you encounter a whole host of lesser-known, more exotic ingredients. You see a woman add a pinch of fine, black powder to the mix. You later learn this is xocōlātl, or string flower, a type of long pepper with a flavor similar to black pepper but with cinnamon-like notes. Another popular addition was xocōlātl, lick flower, which is the Nahuatl word for vanilla, but sometimes also referred to other fragrant blossoms. One of the most intriguing additions was undisturbed, the ear flower. These were the dried petals of a specific flower, Embark penduliflorum, that had a complex flavor profile described as being similar to black pepper, nutmeg, and cinnamon all at once. It was a highly sought-after spice, brought from the distant tropical forests, and its presence in a chocolate drink was a sign of extreme wealth and sophistication. The exact combination of these spices is a matter of intense scholarly interest and, naturally, debate. The Spanish friars who documented Aztec life after the conquest, like Bernardino de Sahagún, left behind lists of these ingredients, but their descriptions can be vague, and correctly identifying every single plant they described is a major challenge for ethnobotanists. For example, the term for honey in Nahuatl could refer to bee honey, but it could also refer to the sweet syrup of the agave or magi plant. So when a recipe calls for honey, which one did they mean? The flavor would be quite different. Historians argue about these recipes, trying to reconstruct the authentic taste of xocōlātl based on these incomplete and sometimes contradictory texts. The woman preparing the drink is not following a written recipe. She is working from memory, from tradition, and from instinct. She adds a pinch of this, a dash of that, smelling and tasting as she goes. She takes a small amount of the thick cacao paste and mixes it with a little warm water in a separate bowl. Then, she starts adding the powdered spices, stirring constantly. She might be making a specific house blend for the nobleman she serves, a flavor profile that he personally prefers. The thick cacao paste is now transformed into a thinner, richly colored, and incredibly aromatic slurry. It's a complex concoction of bitter, spicy, and floral notes. The fundamental character of the drink has been established, but the most important element, the defining characteristic of a truly great cup of xocōlātl, is still missing. The final touch that will elevate it from a simple mixture to a divine beverage is the foam. The flavored cacao mixture sits in a large, deep bowl. It's dark, fragrant, and looks potent, but it's flat and still. The final and most crucial element, the mark of a truly luxurious and well-prepared beverage, is the foam. A thick, frothy, persistent head of foam was considered the most desirable part of the drink. To the Aztecs, the foam was the essence, the spirit of the xocōlātl. Drinking the liquid underneath without first consuming the foam was considered uncivilized. You are about to witness the technique for creating this foam, a method that is both theatrical and highly effective. A woman takes the bowl of prepared chocolate and lifts it high, up to her shoulder level. In her other hand, she holds a second, empty bowl on the ground. Then, with a steady hand and incredible precision, she begins to pour the liquid from the high bowl into the low one. A long, thin, continuous stream of dark chocolate falls through the air, splashing into the bowl below. The effect is immediate. The agitation from the fall, the introduction of air into the liquid, begins to create a thick layer of bubbles on the surface. But she is not done. She sets the now full bowl on a small stool, picks up the empty one, and repeats the process, pouring it back from a height. She does this over and over again, pouring from high to low, then back again. It's a mesmerizing, rhythmic process. It's a performance. The height of the pour is a display of skill. A novice would splash the precious liquid everywhere, but her stream is perfect and controlled. With each pour, the foam on top grows thicker, finer, and more stable. The tiny bubbles from a dense, creamy-looking head that rises up the sides of the bowl. This technique is known as throwing or pouring chocolate. It was the primary method for aeration in Aztec times. The physics of it is simple aeration, but the cultural significance was immense. The ability to create a thick, lasting foam was the sign of an expert. You watch, captivated, as the foam builds. It's a beautiful, rich, reddish brown color, thanks to the cacao added earlier. It looks almost solid, like a mousse. This is what the nobles and priests coveted. This was the part of the drink that was said to contain its life force. But why was foam so important? This is a question that cultural historians have pondered extensively. On one level, it's about texture. The foam provides a light, airy contrast to the rich, sometimes dense liquid below. It's a more pleasant sensory experience. But the significance runs deeper. In many cultures, things that are light and airy, that seem to defy gravity, are associated with the spiritual and the divine. The foam was seen as the most refined part of the drink, the bridge between the earthly liquid and the heavenly air. Consuming it was like consuming the very breath of the gods. One of the more peculiar, lesser-known facts is about the longevity of the foam. A good foam was one that didn't collapse. Some accounts suggest that the foam was so thick and stable that it could be scooped off with a spoon and eaten on its own. It was a delicacy in and of itself. Sometimes, the foam would be prepared separately and then spooned on top of a freshly poured cup of the liquid, ensuring a perfect presentation every time. Now, was this pouring method the only way to create foam? Herein lies a bit of an academic puzzle, complicated by a famous anachronism. Many people today associate Mexican chocolate with a specific wooden whisk called a molino. This tool, with its distinctive rings and paddles, is spun rapidly between the palms to whip air into the chocolate, creating a froth. You see them sold in markets all over Mexico today. However, archaeological and historical evidence strongly suggests that the molino was a post-conquest invention, likely introduced by the Spanish. The Aztecs did not have it. The pre-Hispanic method was pouring. The debate among historians centers on the transition. When and why did the molino replace the more ancient and theatrical pouring technique? Was it simply more efficient? Or did it correspond to a change in the recipe? Perhaps the addition of milk or more sugar by the Spanish, which frothed up better with a whisk. The exact timeline of this technological shift is still being pieced together. The woman pouring the chocolate finally seems satisfied. The bowl is now topped with a magnificent, dense crown of foam, several inches thick. The preparation is complete. The xocōlātl is ready to be served. It has been transformed from a humble bean to a divine beverage through a series of laborious and skillful steps: harvesting, fermenting, drying, roasting, shelling, grinding, flavoring, then now, frothing. The finished product is ladled carefully from the large bowl into individual serving cups. The server is careful not to disturb the precious foam, scooping it gently along with the liquid. The journey is complete. You have followed the bean from the tree to the cup. All that remains is to taste it. But this is not a drink for just anyone. It is reserved for the elite, for warriors, for priests, for the emperor himself. You are a mere observer, an outsider. You have no right to taste it. Or do you? You've been a ghost in the machine, a silent observer of a process you were never meant to see. You followed the cacao bean from the humid groves of the coast to this aristocratic kitchen in the heart of the empire. You've seen the labor, the skill, the artistry. But the final step, the tasting, seems impossibly out of reach. This drink is destined for the lips of nobles, not for an anonymous stranger who worked his passage carrying salt. You are about to slip away, your quest complete in all but its final, most important sensory detail, when a stroke of unimaginable luck occurs. Or perhaps it isn't luck. Perhaps your persistent, quiet observation has been noticed. Eamon enters the kitchen. He is not a servant or a cook. His loincloth is of the finest embroidered cotton, and he wears a magnificent Ilmadolai, a cloak decorated with intricate geometric patterns. His earlobes are adorned with jade plugs, a clear sign of high status. He is a nobleman, likely the master of this household. He speaks in a low, authoritative voice to the women of the kitchen, who all bow their heads in deference. He looks around the kitchen, his eyes sharp and intelligent. And then, his gaze falls on you. You freeze, expecting to be thrown out, or worse, you are somewhere you do not belong. But his expression is not angry. It's curious. He has likely been told of the strange foreigner who has been silently watching the preparations for days. He walks over to you. He is taller than you expected, and he carries an aura of immense power. He says something in Nyhutal. You, of course, do not understand. You can only look back, trying to appear as humble and non-threatening as possible. He studies you for a long moment. Then he turns and says something to one of the head kitchen servants. She looks surprised, then quickly bows and scurries to obey. The nobleman looks back at you and, with a simple, almost imperceptible nod of his head, gestures for you to follow him. Your heart is hammering against your ribs. You follow him out of the bustling kitchen and into a private, enclosed courtyard. It's a beautiful, tranquil space with a small fountain, carefully tended flower beds, and shaded porticos. The air is cool and smells of jasmine and damp earth. This is the inner sanctum of the Aztec elite. You are laid to a low, carved wooden seat. The nobleman sits opposite you. A moment later, the servant arrives. She is carrying a small, lacquer tray. On it are 2 cylindrical cups, filled to the brim with the freshly made xocōlātl, its thick crown of reddish-brown foam looking perfect and untouched. She places the tray between you, sits 1 cup before the nobleman, and 1 cup before you. You stare at the cup. It's an invitation, a gesture of hospitality, or perhaps of curiosity, a chance for this powerful man to observe the strange foreigner experiencing their most sacred beverage. This act of sharing a drink was a deeply significant social ritual. It could be a sign of respect, a way to seal a contract, or a gesture of welcome. For a nobleman to share his personal batch of xocōlātl with a complete unknown is an extraordinary event. This moment highlights a fascinating aspect of Aztec society that is often overlooked in favor of their warrior reputation, their code of hospitality. Early Spanish accounts, despite their overall hostility, often noted the refined manners and elaborate etiquette of the Aztec nobility. There were strict rules about how to speak, how to sit, how to eat, and how to receive guests. You are now, unexpectedly, part of such a ritual. Of course, there is a darker side to this. This hospitality could also be a display of power. By giving you this precious drink, the nobleman is demonstrating his immense wealth and status. He can afford to give away a beverage that costs a commoner a small fortune to even glimpse. This is a point of debate for social historians. Was Aztec generosity a genuine cultural value, or was it a form of competitive feasting, where elites tried to outdo each other with extravagant displays of wealth to enhance their own prestige? The answer is likely a complex mix of both. One other, slightly more paranoid thought crosses your mind. Hospitality could also be a test. In the politically charged world of the Aztec elite, full of intrigue and rivalry, poisoning was a real and ever-present danger. Perhaps the nobleman wants to see if you will drink it first. This is pure speculation, but it's a detail mentioned in some chronicles that high-ranking lords had food tasters for a reason. But you push that thought aside. The cup is before you. The nobleman picks up his own cup, holding it carefully with both hands. He looks at you, his eyes unreadable, and gives another slight nod, an invitation to drink. This is it, the culmination of your entire journey. You have been granted a privilege beyond your wildest dreams. You reach out, your hand trembling slightly, and take the cup. You hold the cup in your hands. It feels cool and smooth against your palms. Before you even think of drinking, you take a moment to admire the vessel itself. This is not just any clay cup. It's a work of art, a testament to the importance of the liquid it contains. The cup is a tall, cylindrical vessel with no handle, designed to be held in both hands. It is made of fine, burnished pottery, polished to a soft, deep red sheen. The surface is covered in intricate painted designs, geometric patterns in black and white that seem to shift in pulse. This style of pottery, you would later learn, is typical of the high-end ceramics used by the Aztec and Mixtec nobility. These were not everyday dishes. They were luxury items, status symbols in their own right. You notice that the shape of the cup seems specifically designed to showcase the form. The tall, straight sides contain the frothy head, preventing it from spilling and allowing it to be presented as a perfect, thick crown on top of the liquid. The use of specialized drinking vessels for chocolate has a long and rich history in Mesoamerica. The Mayans, who had a chocolate culture for centuries before the Aztecs, were famous for their beautiful cylindrical vases, many of which have survived in their tombs. These Mayan vases are a historical treasure trove. They are often painted with complex scenes of courtly life, mythology, and even glyphs that explicitly state the vessel's purpose, sometimes reading, "His cup for cacao." Archaeologists have learned an immense amount about ancient chocolate practices just by studying these cups. Chemical residue analysis performed on the inside of these vessels has confirmed the presence of theobromine and caffeine, the chemical signatures of cacao, proving their use for drinking chocolate. It's a fantastic piece of archaeological detective work, connecting the art on the cup with the actual substance it held. The Aztecs inherited and adapted this tradition. While perhaps not as pictorially elaborate as the classic Mayan vases, the Aztec vessels were elegant and highly symbolic. You see other types of cups in the nobleman's house. Some are shaped like gourds, a nod to the natural vessels that were likely the first containers ever used for the drink. Others are more ornate, with small, mottled feet, perhaps in the shape of an animal or a god. You even see some that appear to be made from actual lacquered gourds, incredibly thin and light. One of the more unusual and debated types of chocolate vessels is the spouted pot. Archaeologists have found ceramic pots with a strange-looking spout coming out of the side. For a long time, their function was a mystery. A leading theory now is that these were a different kind of frothing device. The user would blow air through the spout into the liquid chocolate, creating bubbles from within. This would be an alternative to the more common pouring from a height method. This theory is still debated. However, some scholars argue the spouts were simply for pouring, though their angle seems awkward for that purpose. It's a small, unsolved puzzle in the material culture of cacao. There's another quirky detail about the cups you are holding. They are likely part of a matched set. The Aztec nobility valued symmetry and order, and their formal dishware would have been produced in sets for feasts and gatherings, much like modern fine china. An entire feast might be served on pottery of a single, unified design, a display of wealth and aesthetic taste. As you sit there, holding this exquisite piece of pottery, you realize that the experience of drinking xocōlātl was a full sensory package. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about the aroma of the drink, the coolness of the cup, the visual beauty of the foam and the painted designs, and the social context of the ritual. The cup was not just a container. It was an integral part of the experience, designed to enhance every aspect of the indulgence. The nobleman is waiting patiently, holding his own cup. He has given you this time to appreciate the vessel. It is part of the etiquette. You are not to gulp this drink down like water. You are to savor it, to respect the craftsmanship of the potter as much as the skill of the cook. You raise the cup slowly, bringing it closer to your face. The rich, complex aroma envelops you, the dark, earthy notes of the cacao, the warmth of the chili, the sweet perfume of vanilla. You can smell the immense effort and the long journey contained within this single cup. You finally bring the rim to your lips, ready for the first taste. The thick foam is the first thing you will encounter. Your journey is about to find its climax. You bring the cup to your lips. The nobleman watches you, his expression a mask of polite neutrality. The thick, reddish-brown foam kisses your upper lip, and you take your first sip. But just as you are about to taste the liquid, you notice a final, subtle flourish in the presentation, something you hadn't seen in the kitchen. Sticking out of the foam is a delicate, ornate stick. It looks like a miniature piece of sculpture. It is carved from wood, with a series of rings and small, paddle-like protrusions at the bottom. It's a small, elegant tool, clearly designed for stirring. You pause, looking at the object, then at the nobleman. He sees your hesitation and gives a small, almost imperceptible gesture with his own stick, swirling it gently in his cup before taking a sip. You realize this is the final piece of the puzzle, the last utensil in this elaborate ritual. This is the mole in Ilo. Wait a minute. You stop. A memory clicks into place. In the kitchen, you learned that the foam was created by pouring. You were told the mole in Ilo was a post-conquest Spanish invention. Yet, here it is, in the hands of a pre-conquest Aztec nobleman. What is going on? This moment perfectly encapsulates one of the most persistent and frustrating challenges for historians, the problem of anachronism and cultural contamination in historical sources. The scene you are witnessing is a composite, a blend of different time periods and interpretations, and the mole in Ilo is the key. Let's break it down. As we established, the primary, documented pre-Hispanic method for frothing chocolate was pouring from a height. The archaeological evidence for mole in Ilos before the arrival of the Spanish is virtually non-existent. The tool, a type of whisk or frother, is believed to have been introduced by the Spanish, who were familiar with similar tools in their own cuisine for whipping sauces or drinks. They likely found it a more convenient, less messy, and more efficient way to create foam than the theatrical but cumbersome pouring method. So why is it in your cup? Because over the centuries, the mole in Ilo has become so thoroughly integrated into the culture of Mexican chocolate, making that it is now almost impossible to imagine the drink without it. It has become a powerful symbol of authentic Mexican hot chocolate. When modern artists, writers, and even some historians depict ancient Aztecs drinking chocolate, they often include the mole in Ilo because it feels right. It has been retroactively inserted into the pre-Hispanic past. It's a historical inaccuracy that has become a cultural truth. This is a fantastic example of how history is not a static set of facts, but a constantly evolving narrative. The story of the past is often shaped by the present. The mole in Ilo became so iconic that it traveled back in time, colonizing the historical imagination. The debate over the mole in Ilo's origin is a lively one. Some scholars hold out for the possibility of a pre-Hispanic precursor, some kind of simple stirring stick that might have evolved into the more complex mole in Ilo we know today. They might point to certain ambiguous illustrations in the codices that could be interpreted as a frothing stick. However, the overwhelming consensus among archaeologists and food historians is that the tool as we know it is a product of the colonial period, a fusion of Spanish technology and indigenous culinary tradition. So, the nobleman in front of you would almost certainly not have had a molinillo. His foam would have been the result of a servant's skillful pouring. The stick in his cup would have been, at most, a simple, elegant stirrer, perhaps made of tortoiseshell or carved wood, used to gently mix the sediment that might settle at the bottom of the cup. But here, in our shared story, we'll allow this small, beautiful anachronism to exist, because it tells a deeper story not just about how the Aztecs made chocolate, but about how we remember how they made chocolate. The little wooden whisk in your hand represents the blurring of lines, the fusion of cultures, and the way traditions evolve and rewrite their own origins. It is a symbol of a living, breathing nature of history itself. You look at the mole in Hilo. It's a beautiful object, a piece of folk art. You give it a gentle swirl in your cup, imitating your host. The motion is satisfying, a final small ritual before the moment of truth. You have acknowledged the vessel, you have appreciated the presentation, and now you have interacted with this symbol of a blended history. There is nothing left to do. No more distractions, no more historical detours. You lift the cup once more. The foam, slightly disturbed by your stirring, is still thick and inviting. You take a breath, and you drink. You take a sip. The first sensation is the foam. It's light and airy, yet substantial, with a creamy texture that dissolves on your tongue. It carries the primary aroma of the drink, a cloud of rich cacao and fragrant spice. It's a gentle introduction before the main event. Then, the liquid hits your palate, and it is a shock. Your brain, conditioned by a lifetime of sweet chocolate, is expecting one thing, but your taste buds report something entirely different. The first note is bitterness, not the subtle, pleasant bitterness of a 90% dark chocolate bar, but a deep, profound, and earthy bitterness that is foundational and unapologetic. It's the taste of the roasted nib in its purest liquid form. Before you can fully process the bitterness, a second wave hits you. The spice. The warm, creeping heat from the chili peppers spreads across your tongue and down your throat. It's not a scorching, painful heat, but a deep, glowing warmth that feels purposeful. It enlevens your senses, sharpens your focus. It feels like liquid fire, but in a pleasant, invigorating way. And then, underneath those two dominant notes, the complexity unfolds. You can taste the other spices you saw in the kitchen. There's the floral, almost perfumed sweetness of the vanilla, which doesn't add sugary sweetness but rather a roundness and aromatic complexity. You can detect the faint, peppery notes of the xocōlātl and perhaps the cinnamon-like warmth of the hue in cacao. The cornmeal gives the liquid a subtle thickness, a slight graininess that provides body and substance, preventing it from feeling thin or watery. The final impression is a long, lingering finish that is both bitter and warm, a flavor that coats your mouth and seems to resonate long after you've swallowed. There is absolutely no sugar, not a hint. The only sweetness comes from the aromatic spices, a phantom sweetness that tricks the nose more than the tongue. To a modern palate, the drink is challenging. It's intense, powerful, and utterly savory. It is not a dessert. It is not a comforting treat. It is a stimulant, a potion. You lower the cup, your senses buzzing. You feel more awake, more alert. There's a gentle warmth spreading through your chest. This is the effect of the theobromine caffeine, the natural stimulants in cacao, amplified by the heat of the chili. You can immediately understand why this was a drink for warriors and rulers. It's a beverage that prepares you for action, for ceremony, for a long day of governance. You look at your host, the nobleman. He has been watching your reaction, his face impassive. He takes a slow, deliberate sip from his own cup, savoring it as one might savor a fine wine or an old whiskey. He is not drinking it for comfort. He is drinking it for the effect and the complex flavor experience. This initial reaction of surprise and even slight revulsion from a European palate is well documented. When the Spanish first encountered xocōlātl, many of them hated it. One of the most famous, and possibly apocryphal, quotes comes from an Italian traveler in the 16th century, Girolamo Benzoni, who described it as a drink for pigs. The Spanish conquistadors, accustomed to the sweet flavors of their own cuisine, found the bitterness and spiciness of the drink to be off-putting. This leads to a quirky, lesser-known detail of its reception. The Spanish in the New World didn't immediately start adding sugar to it. Before they sweetened it, they tried to make it palatable by altering the spices. They were particularly fond of adding black pepper and anise, spices they were familiar with, in an attempt to make the flavor profile more recognizable. For a brief period, there was this strange, hybrid version of the drink, a mix of Aztec and European spice cabinets. The question of how bitter the drink truly was is a point of academic discussion. Was it always as intense as what you're tasting, or were there milder versions? Some recipes did call for the addition of honey, either from bees or from the agave plant, which would have taken the edge off the bitterness. However, these sweeteners were used sparingly, as a flavoring element, not as the dominant taste. The fundamental character of the drink was always bitter and savory. The modern conception of chocolate as a sweet is a purely European invention. The debate today among historians and calculators trying to recreate the original xocōlātl is how much, if any, honey is authentic. You take another sip. This time, you are prepared. You let the flavors wash over you, trying to dissect them. The drink is growing on you. The initial shock is fading, replaced by an appreciation for its complexity. It is a powerful and sophisticated flavor profile, a world away from the simple, one-note sweetness you are used to. It is the taste of power, of ritual, of a civilization with a completely different culinary philosophy. You have finally done it. You have tasted the original chocolate, the bitter water, and in its complex, challenging, and powerful flavor, you have tasted a piece of the Aztec soul. As you slowly sip the potent beverage, the initial shock gives way to a deeper understanding. You feel a subtle but undeniable physiological effect. Your mind feels clearer, your senses sharper. The fatigue from your long journey seems to melt away, replaced by a calm, focused energy. You are not jittery, as you might be from too much coffee, but grounded and alert. Now you understand. You finally get it. This is why xocōlātl was the chosen drink of the Aztec warrior. Before a battle, during long marches, or as part of the rituals that preceded a campaign, warriors would be given this drink. It was their fuel, their liquid courage. The combination of theobromine and caffeine provided sustained energy and stamina, while the chili peppers would have induced a state of heightened alertness and perhaps even a mild endorphin rush. It was, in modern terms, the ultimate pre-workout energy drink. The nobleman, seeing your expression of dawning comprehension, says a single word, one you recognize. Soothe. It means that which gives strength. He points to his chest, then to the cup. This was its purpose. This connection between cacao and military might was fundamental. The Emperor Moctezuma, I was said to drink dozens of cups of xocōlātl a day, not just for pleasure, but to maintain his energy for the rigors of ruling a vast empire. His personal supply, and the supply for his elite guard and the top warrior societies like the Eagle and Jaguar Knights, was a strategic resource, as important as any armory of weapons. The warehouses of cacao beans were a direct measure of the empire's military readiness. This warrior-centric view of cacao is well supported by historical texts, like the Florentine Codex. But here lies a fascinating, less discussed aspect of its use. It wasn't just for a pre-battle boost. The drink was also deeply intertwined with the rewards of victory. When a warrior captured an enemy in battle, a feat far more prestigious than simply killing them, he was celebrated with a grand feast. At this feast, he would be served a special preparation of xocōlātl in ornate cups, a public acknowledgement of his valor. Cacao was both the fuel for and the reward of martial success. It was the taste of the warrior class. This brings up a point of nuance that historians still debate. Was the drink available to all soldiers, or only to the elite? The evidence suggests that it was primarily a drink for the nobility and the decorated veterans of the eagle and jaguar societies. A common soldier, a simple peasant conscript, would likely not have had regular access to such a precious commodity. They were more likely fueled by it alive, the simple corn gruel. However, it's possible that on the eve of a major battle, a thinned-down, less potent version of the cacao drink might have been distributed more widely to the rank and file as a special ration to boost morale and stamina. The logistics and social stratification of its military use are still being teased out from the available sources. The cup in your hand, you realize, is a status symbol of the highest order, but a functional one. It's like a luxury sports car, it's a display of wealth. Yes, but it's also a high-performance machine. The nobleman drinking with you is not just indulging. He is maintaining his state of readiness, his tonal li, his vital energy. You also learn of a peculiar and slightly macabre use of the cacao drink in a ritual context. For the captive warrior destined for sacrifice, the situation was complex. In the days leading up to their death, some high-status captives were treated with extreme honor. They were dressed in fine clothes, celebrated, and feasted. In some of these rituals, the captive would be given xocōlātl to drink. Was this an act of mercy, a final luxury, or was it part of the process of preparing them for the gods, ensuring they went to their deaths in a strong and dignified state? The psychology behind this practice is deeply complex and foreign, a mix of reverence and violence that is difficult for a modern mind to fully grasp. You finish the last of your drink. The warmth in your chest lingers. The bitter aftertaste is a pleasant reminder of the experience. You have tasted the drink of power, and you can feel its effects coursing through you. The world seems a little sharper at the edges. Your host, the nobleman, has finished his as well. He sets his cup down with a soft click on the lacquered tray. The audience is over. He has shared his sacred drink with you, this strange being from another world. He has observed your reaction. He rises, and you understand that it is time for you to leave. You bow as deeply and respectfully as you can, a gesture of profound gratitude for the unexpected honor. As you walk away from the nobleman's palace and back into the bustling streets of Tenochtitlan, the world feels different. You are no longer just an observer. You have participated in one of the city's most sacred rituals. You now carry the taste of xocōlātl not just on your tongue, but in your memory. You understand its power, its purpose, but you are about to discover that the drink of warriors also had a softer side, a role it played not in the battlefield of war, but in the battlefield of love and family. You leave the nobleman's palace, the powerful, bitter taste of xocōlātl still lingering in your memory. You've experienced it as a symbol of power, wealth, and martial strength, a distinctly masculine world of warriors and rulers. But as you wander through the residential quarters of Tenochtitlan, away from the grand temples and palaces, you begin to see hints of another side to Cacao's story. You see a young woman, likely a bride-to-be, being escorted by her family. She is adorned with flowers, and her relatives carry small, beautifully decorated pots. You overhear the word caca, what else spoken in a soft, celebratory tone. It seems the sacred being had a role to play in the domestic sphere as well, particularly in the rituals of marriage. Curiosity piqued. You learn that cacao was a crucial element in Aztec wedding ceremonies. The formalization of a marriage among the nobility was a multi-day affair filled with feasting, speeches, and ritual gift-giving. One of the key moments was a ceremonial exchange of cacao. The bride would prepare a gourd of xocōlātl and present it to the groom. He would drink it, and in turn, offer her a drink he had prepared. This exchange symbolized their shared commitment and the mingling of their two families. It was a liquid contract, a shared taste of the future they would build together. This domestic use of cacao reveals a softer, more nuanced side of its cultural significance. It wasn't just for fueling soldiers, it was for cementing alliances between families. But this is where a fascinating and somewhat controversial topic arises: the role of women in cacao. The dominant narrative, reinforced by many Spanish accounts, is that xocōlātl was primarily a drink for men, for nobles, priests, and warriors. Women, it was often said, were forbidden from drinking it, or at least did so much less frequently. Why would this be? The reasons given are varied and complex. Some sources suggest it was believed to be too potent, too stimulating for women. A 17th century English physician living in the New World, Henry Stubb, wrote that cacao would hinder conception and that women should avoid it. This idea that chocolate was an aphrodisiac, a substance that could incite improper passions, was a recurring theme. For a society with rigid social structures, controlling access to such a powerful substance was a way of controlling social behavior. However, this is where the historical record gets murky and the debate begins. Was this prohibition a universal, strictly enforced rule, or was it more of an ideal? Or perhaps a rule that only applied to certain preparations of the drink? The scene of the marriage ceremony you just witnessed directly contradicts the idea that women never partake. Clearly, in a ritual context, they did. Many modern historians are now re-examining this men-only rule, arguing that it might be an exaggeration or a misinterpretation by the Spanish chroniclers. The Spanish, coming from their own deeply patriarchal society, may have projected their own ideas about gender roles onto what they were observing. They tended to interview and focus on the male elites of Aztec society, so their perspective was naturally skewed. The truth is likely more complex. It's possible that the most potent, heavily spiced, and ritually significant preparations of xocōlātl, the kind you drank with the nobleman, were indeed reserved for men of high status. But other, perhaps milder or different preparations of cacao might have been perfectly acceptable for women, especially elite women, to consume. A lesser-known detail that supports this is cacao's use in medicine, particularly for women. Cacao butter, the fat from the bean, was a common ingredient in Aztec pharmacology. It was used as a base for ointments and salves to treat skin conditions, burns, and chapped lips. There are also references in the codices to cacao being prescribed for certain female ailments, although the specific details are often vague. This medicinal use suggests that women had a relationship with the cacao plant that went beyond simply preparing it for their husbands. So the historical debate rages on. Was the Aztec world of chocolate a strictly gendered space, or was the reality more fluid? Did the rules change based on social class, age, or ritual context? The evidence is fragmentary and often contradictory. A perfect example of how difficult it is to reconstruct the daily lives and social rules of a civilization from incomplete texts written largely by outsiders. As you ponder this, you realize how much of the story you've witnessed has been centered on men: the male farmer, the male priest, the male porter, the male nobleman, the male warrior. But behind all of them were the women, the unnamed, unseen women who were the true masters of the meat, the roasters, the grinders, the frothers. They were the ones who possessed the deep, technical knowledge of cacao's transformation. While the men may have drunk the final product in their halls of power, it was the women in the kitchens who were the keepers of the craft. Their labor and expertise were the invisible foundation of the entire cacao culture. Your journey has shown you the public face of cacao, the currency, the tribute, the drink of power. But now you had a glimpse of its private life, a binding element in marriage and a point of contention in the complex social world of men and women. The story of the bitter bean is more layered than you ever imagined. But this intricate world, with its complex rules and rituals, is about to be shattered. A new variable is about to be introduced, one that will change the fate of cacao, and the fate of this empire, forever. On the distant horizon, something is coming. Life in Tenochtitlan continues its rhythmic, predictable cycle. The markets of Tautoleko roar. The tribute processions arrive. The priests perform their ceremonies, and the smell of wood smoke and roasting corn fills the air. The world feels ancient, stable, and permanent. But then, rumors begin to trickle into the city. They are strange, fragmented whispers, carried by traders and travelers from the eastern coasts, the lands of the Teutonasi people. The rumors speak of impossible things. They speak of floating mountains or towers on the water, seen moving across the ocean. At first, these are dismissed as fanciful tales, the kind of stories fishermen tell after too much pulq. But the rumors persist, and they become more detailed. They speak of men with skin as pale as limestone and hair the color of the sun. Men with beards that cover their faces, something unheard of among the people here. They are said to wear clothing made of a strange, shining metal, and to carry sticks that speak with the voice of thunder and spit fire. Most terrifying of all, the rumors say these strangers ride upon giant, hornless deer that are fast, strong, and terrifyingly obedient. Of course, you know they are talking about ships. White men, blimey, guns, and horses. But to the people of Tenochtitlan, who have never seen any of these things, they are concepts from another reality, things of myth and portent. The mood in the city begins to shift. There is a low-grade hum of anxiety beneath the surface of daily life. In the temples, the priests become more active. The number of ceremonies increases. The scent of copal incense seems thicker, and the sound of ceremonial drums echoes more frequently across the lake. The emperor, Moctezuma I, is said to be in deep consultation with his diviners and soothsayers, trying to understand the meaning of these omens. This is the year one read in the Aztec calendar, 1519 in the European one. And as you know from the priest's tale, it is the very year that the prophecy foretold the potential return of the exiled god, Quetzalcoatl, from the east. The arrival of these strange beings from the eastern sea at this exact time is a coincidence of cosmic, terrifying proportions. Is it the god returning as promised? Or is it something else? Something new and dangerous? You watch as Moctezuma dispatches envoys to the coast. These are high-ranking nobles, and they carry with them gifts of incredible value not as tribute, but as offerings, or perhaps as a test. They bring intricate feather work, fine gold jewelry, and a magnificent turquoise mosaic mask. They also bring the regalia of the gods, the ceremonial costumes of Quetzalcoatl and other deities. The plan seems to be, if these are gods, they will recognize their sacred attire. When the envoys eventually return, their reports only deepen the confusion and fear. They describe their encounter with the leader of the strangers. They speak of the deafening roar of the cannons and the bewildering power of the horses. They offered the strangers food, including turkey, fruit, and tortillas. But what of the most sacred offering? This is where you learn a fascinating and telling detail about this first encounter. The Aztec envoys also offered the Spanish xocōlātl, served in golden goblets. It was the highest honor they could bestow, an offering fit for a returning god. They presented the dark, frothy, bitter, chili-spiced beverage to Cortez and his men. This was the ultimate test. How would these beings from another world react to the sacred drink? The reaction was not what they expected. The Spanish, you learn from the returned envoys' bewildered report, were completely disgusted by it. They took a sip of the unsweetened, bitter, spicy liquid and, according to some accounts, spat it out. To their palates, it was nothing more than a foul-tasting, bitter sludge. They were far more interested in the golden cups it was served in than the precious liquid inside. This moment, this clash of palates, is a perfect metaphor for the entire encounter between the two civilizations. The Aztecs offered what they considered most valuable, a sacred, ritually important substance. The Spanish saw no value in it at all. They only saw the material wealth of the container it came in. It was a fundamental misunderstanding, a failure to grasp what the other culture prized. This negative first impression of chocolate is a point that historians find both ironic and significant. The substance that would go on to conquer the world's sweet tooth was initially rejected as disgusting. The debate among historians is how much this initial rejection colored the subsequent interactions. Did the Spanish dismissal of this sacred drink signal to the Aztecs that these were not gods, but something else entirely? Or did it just add to the confusion? Moctezuma's reaction to this news was complex. The strangers did not act like gods, but they possessed godlike power. The puzzle of their identity remained unsolved. The strangers, led by Cortez, are now beginning their slow, deliberate march inland from the coast. They are making alliances with local peoples, like the Tlaxcala who have long chafed under Aztec rule and are eager for a chance to overthrow their powerful rivals. The floating mountains have unleashed a force that the empire, for all its power and sophistication, is unprepared for. The stability of your world is fracturing. The rhythm of life is broken. The future, which once seemed as solid as the pyramids, is now a terrifying unknown. The bitter taste in your mouth is no longer just from the xocōlātl, but from the premonition of what is to come. The strange men from the sea are on their way to Tenochtitlan, and they are about to come face to face with the civilization that runs on the bitter bean. The inevitable arrives. The strangers from the sea, led by Hernan Cortez, march across the causeway and enter Tenochtitlan. It is not a battle, but a cautious, tense reception. Moctezuma, the emperor, chooses diplomacy over confrontation, welcoming Cortez and his men into the city as guests. He houses them in one of the grand palaces of his father. You watch from the crowds as they enter. The sight is as strange and awe-inspiring as the rumors describe. The gleam of steel armor in the sun, the impossible size of the horses, the grim, bearded faces of the soldiers. It feels like a procession from another dimension has just marched into the heart of your reality. In the days and weeks that follow, an uneasy peace holds. Moctezuma and Cortez engage in a delicate political dance. The Spanish are overwhelmed by the city's scale and splendor, while the Aztecs are trying to understand the nature and intentions of their powerful guests. During this time, the Spanish are exposed to the daily life of the Aztec elite, and that means they are once again exposed to xocōlātl. They see it served at every feast Moctezuma holds. They see the emperor himself drinking it constantly from golden cups. They witness the reverence with which it is treated. But their opinion of the drink itself does not improve. You see this firsthand. A Spanish soldier, quartered in the palace, is offered a cup of the frothy beverage by a nervous Aztec attendant. The soldier, the young man with a wispy beard, looks at the dark, foamy liquid with suspicion. He smells it, wrinkles his nose at the unfamiliar, unsweetened aroma. He takes a tentative sip. His reaction is immediate. A grimace of disgust. He mutters something in his own language. You don't understand the words, but the tone is universal. He finds it vile. He pushes the cup away and asks for water instead. You see this scene repeat itself over and over. The Spanish simply cannot comprehend why the Aztecs prize this bitter, spicy concoction. This culinary disconnect is a constant source of misunderstanding. The Spanish chronicler Bernal Diaz del Castillo, who was part of the expedition, wrote about the drink with a kind of detached curiosity. He noted the vast quantities Moctezuma consumed and that it was said to give him success with women, playing up the aphrodisiac angle. But he also described it as a drink that one had to get used to. It was not love at first sip. This leads to a fascinating and slightly comical detail. What the Spanish did like was the foam. Some accounts suggest that the soldiers, while disliking the bitter liquid, were intrigued by the thick, stable foam on top. They would sometimes scoop off the foam and eat it, finding its light texture and milder flavor more palatable, before discarding the rest of an almost beer-like concoction. It was a partial acceptance, a hint of the potential they were otherwise missing. But the real value of cacao, from the Spanish perspective, was not as a beverage, but as money. They were quick to understand its role as currency in the marketplace. Here was a system they could grasp. They saw the little brown beans being used to buy goods, and they understood that controlling the supply of cacao meant controlling wealth. In their initial reports back to Spain, they were more likely to describe cacao as the money that grows on trees than as a foodstuff. This economic understanding is a key point that historians emphasize. The Spanish conquest was driven by a quest for wealth, specifically gold. But in Mesoamerica, they stumbled upon a different kind of economy. The debate among economic historians is how quickly and how effectively the Spanish integrated themselves into this cacao-based system. Did they initially dismiss it, or did they immediately start demanding cacao as tribute from conquered towns, recognizing its local value? The evidence suggests the latter. They were pragmatic conquerors. If cacao was the local gold, then they would take cacao. The uneasy peace in Tenochtitlan eventually shatters. In an act of brutality and poor judgment, one of Cortez's lieutenants orders a massacre of Aztec nobles during a religious festival. The city erupts in fury. The cautious hospitality turns into open warfare. The Spanish are driven from the city in a bloody retreat known as La Noche Triste, the sad night. But they return, bolstered by their Tlaxcala and allies in the devastating, invisible ally of smallpox, a disease to which the native population had no immunity. The Spanish lay siege to the magnificent city of Tenochtitlan. The siege is brutal and devastating. The canals run with blood, and the floating gardens become battlefields. In the end, after months of horrific fighting, the city falls in August of 1521. The Aztec Empire, for all its power and glory, is broken. The magnificent city of Tenochtitlan is left in ruins. The world you have come to know is gone. The temples are torn down, the palaces looted. The intricate social order has collapsed, and the fate of the sacred being, the xocōlātl, is now in the hands of the very men who found its taste so disgusting. It seems destined to become a footnote, a forgotten beverage of a conquered people. But the story of cacao is not over. In fact, a new chapter, one that will change the world, is just beginning. The dust of conquest settles over the ruins of Tenochtitlan. On its rubble, a new city begins to rise. Mexico City, the capital of New Spain. The world has been irrevocably altered. The old gods are suppressed, the old empire is shattered, and a new colonial order is imposed. And what of xocōlātl? For a time, it seems destined to fade away. The Spanish masters of the new colony still, for the most part, dislike the drink. They prefer the wine and brandy they import from their homeland. The sacred cacao drink, in its original form, retreats into the villages and the homes of the surviving indigenous population, a private taste of a lost world. But a funny thing happens when cultures collide. They begin to borrow from each other, to adapt and to fuse. The Spanish colonists, living in this new land, start to slowly acquire a taste for some of the local customs, and some clever individual, whose name is lost to history, has a revolutionary idea. We don't know who it was. It could have been a Spanish friar trying to make the native drink more palatable to his European brethren. It could have been an Aztec woman in a colonial kitchen, trying to please her new Spanish master. It could have been a creative merchant looking for a new product to sell. But someone, somewhere, decides to add a spoonful of a new, magical ingredient to the traditional bitter, spicy chocolate recipe. That ingredient is sugar. The Spanish had brought sugarcane with them to the New World, establishing plantations in the Caribbean. The crystallized, intoxicatingly sweet substance was a luxury they were intimately familiar with. The addition of sugar to xocōlātl is a lightning strike. It is the moment that changes everything. You are in a colonial kitchen now. The meat is still there. The cacao is still used for roasting. The base of the drink is still prepared in the traditional way. But after the cacao paste is ground, after the spices are added, a heaping spoonful of precious, granular cane sugar is stirred into the mix. The result is a revelation. The sugar does not just mask the bitterness, it transforms it. It balances the deep, earthy notes of the cacao, creating a profound and harmonious flavor profile. The bitterness is still there, but it's now a complex counterpoint to the sweetness, not the dominant flavor. The heat of the chili is still present, but it's now a pleasant, surprising kick at the end of a sweet sip. The floral notes of the vanilla suddenly pop, enhanced by the sweetness. This is the birth of chocolate as the world would come to know it. It is a fusion product, a perfect blend of old world and new world tastes. It is the child of the Aztec xocōlātl and Spanish sugar. This new, sweetened version of the drink becomes an instant sensation among the Spanish colonists. They fall in love with it. It becomes the fashionable beverage of choice in Mexico City, served hot for breakfast or as an afternoon pick-me-up. They start to tweak the recipe further, often removing the chili, which many still found too aggressive, and adding other familiar European spices like cinnamon and anise. From Mexico City, the love for this new drink spreads across the Atlantic. Sacks of cacao beans, which were once tribute for the Aztec emperor, are now loaded onto Spanish galleons sailing for Europe. But they are now always accompanied by another precious cargo, sugar. Chocolate arrives in Spain in the late 16th century and quickly becomes the secret indulgence of the Spanish court. The monks and nuns, in their cloistered convents, become experts at preparing the drink, their secret recipes closely guarded. For almost a century, Spain manages to keep chocolate as its own delicious secret. But secrets this good don't last. Through royal marriages, trade, and espionage, the knowledge of chocolate eventually spreads to France, then Italy, then the rest of Europe. Each culture adapts it to its own tastes. The French make it a decadent aristocratic obsession at Versailles. The Italians create their own dense, pudding-like versions. In London, chocolate houses spring up, becoming fashionable hubs of political debate and social gathering, rivals to the already popular coffee houses. This European adoption of chocolate is a subject of great fascination for historians. They debate the exact routes it took to spread across the continent. Did it travel primarily through aristocratic courts or through monastic networks? How much did medicinal beliefs about chocolate, that it was a health food and an aphrodisiac, contribute to its popularity? The story of chocolate's conquest of Europe is as complex as any military campaign. A fascinating, little-known consequence of this European craze was its effect back in the Americas. The demand for cacao and sugar exploded. This led to the expansion of plantations throughout the tropical regions of the Americas, often relying on the brutal exploitation of enslaved labor, primarily from Africa. The innocent bean of the Aztecs, once a symbol of their own imperial power, became a key commodity in the new, brutal global economy of the colonial powers. Its journey from a sacred drink to a cash crop was complete. You are standing at a historical crossroads. You can taste the memory of the original, the pure, the powerful xocōlātl. But you can also see the future, a future where that original taste is all but forgotten, replaced by a sweetened, tamed version destined for global domination. The bitter has been conquered by the sweet. The drink of the warriors has become the treat of the world. You stand now in a quiet, shadowy space, a museum of the mind. Around you are the ghosts of the flavors you've experienced. On one side, there is the shop, pungent aroma of the original xocōlātl, a phantom of chili, bitter bean, and sacred flowers. On the other, the warm, comforting, and universally beloved scent of sweetened hot cocoa, a ghost of sugar, milk, and cinnamon. The two stand in stark contrast, a testament to a journey that spans centuries and continents. The original drink, the true xocōlātl, has all but vanished from the world. Its authentic taste, tied to a specific time, place, and worldview, is now a historical curiosity. In echo, what we call chocolate today is its sweet, Europeanized descendant. The untamed spirit of the Aztec drink was domesticated, its challenging edges smoothed down for mass appeal. You think back to the entire process. The farmer in the humid groves of xocōlātl, harvesting the heavy pods. The patient fermentation under banana leaves, a controlled rot that gave the bean its soul. The rhythmic raking under the sun. The long, arduous journey on the back of a porter. The intoxicating aroma of the como roast. The delicate dance of winnowing. The back-breaking labor at the meat. The alchemical addition of spices. The theatrical frothing. Each of these steps was a testament to a deep, intimate connection with the natural world and a mastery of technique honed over generations. This was not industrial production. This was craft. This was ritual. The final drink was not just a product. It was the culmination of a sacred process, imbued with the labor